Chapter 1019 Earth's Core Island. Chapter 1019 Earth's Core Island. In the immortal realm, there were various kinds of cultivators with special abilities. The most commonly seen, and possessing the highest status, were naturally alchemists. That was because if you did not have a weapon, you could still buy a piece of godly metal, and no matter how much you tormented it, you would still be able to forge a usable weapon with it. Then, with constant use over a long time, your own martial intent would be instilled in this weapon. In fact, it could completely be used like a god tool itself. Furthermore, it would be a god tool that only belonged to you. In the immortal realm, the definition of a god tool was a weapon that anyone could activate, possessing power on the immortal level. Thus, the difference between a weapon that one had personally nurtured and a god tool was that one could only be used by yourself, and would only be a piece of trash in anyone else's hands, whereas the other could be used in anyone's hands as long as they possessed enough power to activate it. We're getting off topic. Weaponsmiths naturally belonged to the category of cultivators with special abilities. They could engrave unique formation patterns on weapons, as well as other complicated objects, so that the weapons would have great power like cultivators themselves. Because of that, weaponsmiths did not have a low status, either. Every cultivator would desire a weapon that they were better at using. Besides, weaponsmiths could also create armor. With the increase in defenses, one would only have endless possibilities brought by being alive, after all. Aside from them, there were also formation masters. The great formation of the imperial capital, for example, was created by a formation grandmaster. Their status was extremely high in the joint peace planet. Even the three great emperors would be very respectful when in their presence. Next was a group of cultivators with special abilities that belonged to a very rarely seen group, such as diviners, astrologers, and puppeteers. Puppeteers could make an inanimate object look like it was alive. In the imperial capital, the creations of puppeteers could also be seen, such as a very small number of horse-drawn carriages, wherein the horsepower were not demonic beasts, but rather puppets. Those comprised of weaponsmithing, formation techniques, and there was even some alchemy in the mix, which made it extremely complicated. Hence, there were pitifully few puppeteers. Those puppet-drawn carriages in the imperial capital were not produced in this era, but rather merely remnants from who knew how long ago. Thus, when they saw three people mounting puppets suddenly appear on the island, Yang Taicheng and the others were naturally astonished. This was a deserted island, and furthermore, there was a shockingly colossal pit here. Now, even puppeteers had appeared. This was really too bizarre. Ha 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 ha, I never thought that guests would come to this island, the young man on the lion said. We sensed some movement previously, and thought that something had gone wrong with the mechanical birds. We never imagined that there would actually really be guests. Yang Taicheng, as the ship captain, was naturally unwilling to delegate his responsibility to others. With clasped hands, he said, "We have encountered a storm, and drifted here. May I ask what exactly this place is?" "This is Earth's Core Island," the young man on the tiger replied, smiling. He pointed at the deep pit on the side. "We call this Earth's Core Cave, and apparently, it can reach the core of the planet." "Oh, right. I am Guo Xiuwen, and these two are my junior brothers, Ning Tai and Tong Yulong. Greetings, everyone." Ning Tai and Tong Yulong both clasped their hands in greeting. Ling Han and the others gave their names as well, introducing themselves. "So you have encountered the attack of a demonic beast, which crashed into your ship, and that is why you have floated here." Guo Xiuwen nodded, and continued, "This island is a place for living in seclusion, and the people on the island have no intention to barge into the outside island. Instead, men would farm, whereas women weave as we enjoy a life of peace. Everyone, please come to rest at our village first. We'll see if we can build a ship for you all and send you off," Ning Tai continued. "However, we are already accustomed to peace, so we request you all to keep the location of this island a secret and not leak it out, leading to the destruction of our peaceful lives," Tong Yulong continued. Yang Taicheng and the others nodded in response. "We still have 3 companions." Though Yang Taicheng was not fond of Luo Wu and Fan Yong, as the ship's captain, he was still responsible. "Understood, we still have 2 of our junior brothers who have headed over. You can meet them at the village," Guo Xiuwen said, smiling. Yang Taicheng nodded. Everyone, please come with us. Guo Xiuwen moved the tiger he was riding on, and slowly headed downhill. They all followed behind him, and after walking for about an hour, they finally passed through the dense jungle. A valley appeared ahead of them. The sides of the valley were steep, with mountains in all directions, and there was only a very narrow and small entrance. One man guarded the pass, and even 10,000 wouldn't be able to break through. This thought flashed past in Ling Han's head. As long as a single elite was here as overseer, then even if there was an army outside, they would not be able to enter. However, at the same time, as long as there was an elite blocking the way here, the people inside would not be able to come out as well. The entrance was not guarded. Instead, there were only 2 stone statues. One was an 8-legged spider, whereas the other was a large bird whose wings were stretched out. One could see how robust its claws were, as they were even wider than a human arm. They entered into the valley, and instantly, the valley became wide, revealing a beautiful picture. This place had multiple farms, which formed a circular pattern, and in the middle, there was a very, very large village. The bridges, flowing water, and houses were filled with the beauty of the countryside. Seeing this scene so abruptly would cause one to forget the cruelty of battle and the bloody reek of power, and only feel at ease and absolved of worries. This is a really good place, Yang Taicheng said sincerely. Would I be able to enjoy my retirement here in future? Guo Xiuwen laughed, and replied, if Brother Yang decides to live in seclusion, why not? However, I have to remind you all, please forget your identities as cultivators after coming here. We strictly forbid fighting here, and no matter if you are in the heavenly body tier or in the shattering void tier, in this place, you would only be a farmer or a weaver. Everyone nodded. Every place had its own rules. A powerful dragon couldn't defeat a snake in its nest what more when they were freeloaders. In the farms, they could see people guiding cows as they plowed the land, and there were some transplanting rice seedlings as well, looking busy yet relaxed. They walked on the small path between the farms, and entered into the village. There were a few scattered people walking on the streets. The majority stayed indoors, with some watering their plants, and some sunbathing. There was also smoke rising from cooking, with the whole place appearing incredibly peaceful and serene. The people here are fond of quiet, so I would ask all of you not to disturb others. After everyone came here, they have forgotten who they previously were, Guo Xiuwen reminded once more. After walking some more, they came to the center of the village. There was a manor that occupied a large area. It was about the size of a third of the whole village, and was surrounded by walls. The main doors were open, and a huge courtyard appeared as soon as they entered. Limestone tiles were laid out there, making it appear a bit like a martial training court, though not one person was training. Everyone, I will first make arrangements for your accommodations. My master is fond of creating various rare, unusual objects, and every time he embarks on a project, it could take him quite a number of days. Thus, you may have to wait for a good number of days to be able to see him, Guo Xiuwen said apologetically. Everyone said they did not mind. If they did not get help, they would be drifting for who knew how many days in the large, empty sea before finally being able to return to the marine roots of the Yang clan. Hence, they would not mind waiting a few days here. Guo Xiuwen led them to the eastern part of the manor. There was a large number of small courtyards here, and he allocated them to everyone respectively. After all the arrangements were done, Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Liu Ying were also led here by 2 young men. Those 2 young men were Guo Xiuwen's junior brothers. One was called Quida, and the other was called Biyu Zhangyun. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu stayed in one of the courtyards. Anyways, with the Black Tower, they did not care about the condition of their accommodations. At this time, the sky had darkened as well. Extremely strange, Ling Han said. Chapter 1020, Strangeness. Chapter 1020, Strangeness. What's so strange? Shui Yenyu drew out a bamboo chair and sat down as she enjoyed this astonishing serenity. There was the sound of wind and leaves, peace, and serenity here, causing her to forget the disputes of the outside world. I say, wife, have you stayed so long in the imperial capital that you have become dumb? Ling Han asked, grinning. I don't want to speak with a damn pervert. Shui Yenyu closed her eyes, looking like she was about to take a catnap. Ling Han snickered, walked over, and picked her up off her seat. Then, he sat down himself, held her in his arms, and began exploring the secluded, beautiful scenery of her body without any reservations. Woo, Shui Yenyu released a moan in embarrassment. This guy was really too bad. Now, her weaknesses had already been gripped tightly in his hands, and he could instantly cause her will to crumble, causing her to sink into that captivating yet embarrassing *** sensation. Wife, this place of yours seems to have become bigger, Ling Han said quietly by her ear. Would that be my credit? Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes angrily at him. Wasn't it because he was fond of playing around with that place? And he dared call it a credit? Pay, damn pervert. Remove your dirty hand. She made a pretense of aloofness. How could Ling Han be willing to retreat? Now that he had occupied those two high peaks, he still continued to switch from one to another, intending to divide his attention equally and treat them both the same to avoid one being bigger than the other, affecting the aesthetic quality of it. Every time he said that, it would naturally result in Shui Yenyu rolling her eyes at him as she used her fists to punch him. Wife, have you really not found anything strange about this place? Ling Han kissed her slender snow-white nape. A hint of fragrance entered his nostrils, her snowy skin smooth and glowing. Whether it was the touch of his hands, or his lips, it was indescribably wonderful. Shui Yenyu only felt her whole body had gone completely soft as she groaned miserably in her heart. Repeatedly, this damn pervert would take liberties with her. How much longer would she be able to maintain her reservedness? She was probably about to raise her white flag in surrender, and take the initiative to share a night of pleasure with this damn pervert, wasn't she? With you doing this to me, how would I be able to think properly? She asked in annoyance. Ling Han couldn't help but feel his heart flutter, and said, the word doing is really well said. It made me suddenly want to further discuss the meaning of life with you. Damn pervert. It was apparent that Shui Yenyu's art of insulting others had not improved much. It had only increased from 1 word to 2 words, but the main style was practically unchanged. Ling Han laughed loudly. You have stayed too long in the imperial capital, so you do not know how dangerous the outside world could be. True, the imperial capital is filled more with power struggles than anything else, and you would not be qualified to be drawn into such disputes, either. You speak as if you understand everything. Shui Yenyu quickly grabbed Ling Han's hand. This guy actually wanted to untie her robes. He was really too perverted. Ling Han squeezed her peaks lightly, and easily crumbled the resistance of this seductive beauty. He admired Shui Yenyu's beautiful, naked body. It was as white as jade, but also seemed to be carved out of ivory, beautiful without equal. Wife, don't you think that this place is too strangely quiet? What's so strange about it? Shui Yenyu practically moaned. As a breeze blew past, her hair waved slightly, and her jade-like skin reflected a magnificent glow under the moonlight, captivating the heart and soul. From the moment we entered the village, not one person spared another look at us, Ling Han said. Didn't they already explain? After coming here, everyone has left behind their previous identities, and only wishes to enjoy a life of peace. Shui Yenyu, on the other hand, did not find anything odd about that. Ling Han smiled, and said, it is one thing to enjoy a life of peace, but if a group of strangers suddenly appeared in your home, at the very least you would pay some attention to it. You would definitely not ignore them altogether. Shui Yenyu was slightly stunned, her beautiful eyes suddenly snapping open. Yet, she discovered that her upper body was completely bare. That damn pervert was currently admiring the curves of her body, her high peaks and deep valley. Immediately, she flushed in embarrassment, and quickly pulled her clothing over to cover herself up. Yet how could such beautiful scenery be covered? Instead, her half-covered image increased the temptation she posed, causing Ling Han to swallow repeatedly. He suddenly had the urge to carry this seductive beauty into the house and begin his conquest. However, Shui Yenyu currently was just a bit embarrassed. After all, now that Ling Han had taken advantage of her so many times, she was slightly used to it as well. She said, it is indeed a bit odd. Furthermore, Ling Han continued with a serious face. Have you discovered that there is not one child in this village? I have looked over, and this place has not only elderly. There is a considerable number of young people too. Leaving behind their battles and aggression did not mean that they would leave behind even that as well. Just think about it, if we farm in the day, besides having fun at night, what else could be done here? Shui Yenyu's small mouth gaped. She had indeed been shocked. This guy's previous words had caused a bit of a chill to race up her spine, but why had he suddenly jumped onto that topic? What kind of logical thought process did he have? True enough, he was a pervert by nature, and she had not addressed him wrongly. But when she thought further, she felt that Ling Han's words were very logical. It was a peaceful village, but why were there no children? In the real countryside, it should be young people working in the field while the elderly were sitting the courtyards, and the children would be playing around in the village. Damn pervert, can you stop moving around? You're touching so much that I can't think properly. Shui Yenyu could not help but exclaim in annoyance. This guy's large hands had been wreaking havoc on her breasts all this while, causing her to feel flustered. I swear by my conscience, I merely want this pair of sisters to grow bigger quickly, Ling Han declared seriously as he gripped her breasts. Shameless. Shui Yenyu was about to pass out. How did she end up with such an undependable man? Ling Han laughed, and finally retreated as he said, then we'll wait until night when it's all quiet. Even if I die, I will not let you have your way. Shui Yenyu had gotten a scare, thinking that this guy had finally lost his patience and was planning to devour her. In truth, she actually was prepared for that kind of thing to happen, but she was a woman, after all. No matter what, she had to be reserved. Ling Han was startled, and shook his head as he said, You asterisk, what is your head filled with? I was saying, when it's night and quiet, we'll go out to take a look around, and see what's going on. Shui Yenyu finally realized that she had misunderstood Ling Han, and couldn't help but blush furiously. However, when she saw the mischievous grin on Ling Han's face, she knew that this guy had definitely baited her into it. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and pinch heavily the soft flesh at Ling Han's waist. You, damn, pervert. The couple was lovey-dovey for a little while longer, and finally stood up reluctantly. After tidying up their attire, they quietly walked out the doors. Yi, where are the both of you heading at such a late hour? They had just exited their side courtyard when they saw Quida come out of the shadows, riding a white elephant. This white elephant was naturally a puppet as well. It was 6 meters tall, and as its trunk waved around, one would find it difficult to distinguish if it was a real elephant in the darkness. The scenery here is so beautiful and quiet, so we wanted to take a walk, Ling Han answered. Hehe, the people here are fond of quiet, particularly at night. It would not be nice to disturb the others when they rest. Quida shook his head. The two of you had better return quickly to rest as well. Shui Yenyu's hand shook slightly, and she was just about to draw out her divine sword, yet Ling Han stretched out an arm to curl around her slender waist, and his hand tightened its grip. She had already developed a kind of tacit understanding with Ling Han, and knew the latter was signaling her to be patient. All right, we will go back, Ling Han said with a smile, and shook his head slightly at Shui Yenyu. Chapter 1021 Island Master Pei. Chapter 1021 Island Master Pei. It's strange, and too suspicious, Shui Yenyu declared immediately when they had returned to their own courtyard. Ling Han nodded, and exclaimed, My wife is brilliant. Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him in annoyance, and asked, You are showing off your foresight, aren't you? All my achievements are inevitably linked to the teachings of my wife. You. Aren't you my teacher? Ling Han asked, smiling. Shui Yenyu's beautiful face involuntarily flushed. She had indeed been Ling Han's teacher for a while, and in the end, Ling Han was close to dragging her into bed by now. Though the two of them were not master and disciple, but rather teacher and student, the mere thought of it still caused her much embarrassment. That Quida obviously did not want us to go and investigate. According to him, the people here are accustomed to resting early, so how could he possibly be standing guard there at such a late hour at night otherwise? He is obviously monitoring us. Ling Han nodded, and said, Unfortunately, I am, by nature, a curious person. The more you do not want me to know, the more I want to find out. This time, Shui Yenyu was supportive of Ling Han, and asked, then will we be sneaking out again later? No, we're sleeping, Ling Han answered with a grin. Shui Yenyu was about to be driven mad. Have you begun your huge skips in logical thought process again? Ling Han kissed her, and replied, on this first day, it is both the time when our curiosity is the strongest, as well as the time when the other side is the most guarded. I think the 5 people on the island should be guarding us. Unless we plan to completely become hostile with them immediately, we could not possibly leave tonight. Tomorrow, then? Shui Yenyu asked. We'll play it by ear. Ling Han answered seriously. This valley was easy to guard, but difficult to assault. There was only a single way of entry and exit, and it was a naturally formed place of danger. Since they had already taken the initiative to enter into this trap, they definitely could not be rash or reckless. Shui Yenyu nodded. She was gradually leaning more and more towards having Ling Han make the decisions and take the lead in matters. Just in case, they still entered into the Black Tower. Shui Yenyu began cultivating, whereas Ling Han continued to concoct his heavenly pearl pill. He definitely had to finish concocting this alchemical pill as soon as possible. Not only would it speed up the advancement of his cultivation level, it would also bring him a high income. Cultivation was naturally inseparable from money to support it. At the beginning, it had been gold and silver, followed by origin crystals, and now, it had become true origin stones, but in essence, they were the same. As the night passed, Ling Han revealed a smile of satisfaction. He was getting closer and closer to success. The couple exited the Black Tower, and they walked out of their courtyard after having their breakfast. In the case of young Tai Cheng and the others, some had had a good night's sleep, and appeared to be energetic and awake. Others, though, were still looking weary. It was obvious that they had not slept very well the night before. After all, those like young Tai Cheng, Fan Yong, and the others, who had had a wealth of experience of journeying outside, knew the dangers of the world, and would definitely not trust anyone so easily. In contrast, Jin Juehui and the others lacked that kind of alertness in this area, and slept very soundly the night before. They gathered again. Luo Wu and Fan Yong made no attempt to conceal their killing intent towards Ling Han. However, they were now freeloaders, and added with the fact that young Tai Cheng was here, they did not dare make a move on Ling Han. Everyone, it is really a coincidence. My master just happened to come out of seclusion today, and wishes to see you all. Guo Xiuwen walked over. Naturally, he was still riding on that puppet tiger, just as if he had no idea how to walk without that toy. However, on the other hand, puppets could be considered god tools that could awaken themselves. Since he was riding around on a puppet all day, was he also carefully guarding against them? Then we must definitely visit Lord Island Master, they all replied, smiling. Master is a very brilliant puppeteer, and is skilled at creating various rare and unusual objects. With Master's help, we will definitely be able to create an excellent, well-built ship which will safely allow you to leave here, Guo Xiuwen said. These words immediately moved their hearts. None of them had any plans of living in seclusion in the woods. With Guo Xiuwen leading the way, they arrived at the main hall of the manor. It was really a great hall. It was over 30 meters wide, and as tall as 15 meters, just like a palace. In the innermost part of the main hall, an old man was seated. He should be the master of Guo Xiuwen and his junior brothers. The old man had a very tall build. Even if he was seated, he was as tall as an ordinary man who was standing. He could practically match young Tietcheng's size. I am Pei Ji. The old man did not stand up, and merely nodded at them. Then, smiling, he said, I am not being rude here. I have long since lost my legs, so I cannot stand. He lifted his long robes. True enough, the part of his legs beneath the knee was gone, and thinking back on his words, they should have been chopped off by another, or perhaps some accident had happened to cause his handicap. He was not born a cripple. It's all right, it's fine. Everyone quickly shook their heads. Peiji said, I already know what you have gone through. I just so happen to have some materials on hand, so I will spend a few days' time to build a small ship for all of you. It will take me 5 days at minimum, and 10 days at most. After I am done, I will inform you. In these few days' time, you can all take a good rest and enjoy a life of peace. Thank you, Lord Island Master. They were all very glad. He was a puppeteer, so he would definitely have a pair of skillful hands. Peiji nodded. If you are interested in the process of puppet construction, you may chat with my disciples. I, too, hope that this art could be developed and promoted to allow more people to learn it. When these words were said, everyone was pleasantly surprised. Puppetry and ultimate martial arts techniques were the same, and belonged to the category of secret treasures. However, Peiji was actually willing to share his knowledge. His generosity was really astonishing. Even Shui Yenyu was wavering slightly. Had she and Ling Han been overly suspicious? How could this kind of person be a villain? Peiji chatted with them for a while longer, but it was all pointless conventional talk. Soon, he expressed that he did not want to waste any more time, and wanted to begin building the ship. Everyone was naturally pleased. The faster he got started, the better it would be, so they naturally all excused themselves. Everyone, if you are interested in the construction of puppets, you may come seek out myself and my brother disciples. We will take turns to discuss with you all, and as long as you have talent, we will definitely not keep our skill to ourselves, Guoshuan said, smiling. Everyone was greatly interested, and indicated that they would be paying them a visit. Ling Han, on the other hand, was not greedy. He was cultivating both alchemy and martial arts, and following two paths at the same time was enough to make him feel strained. What more when another art of puppetry would be tossed into the mix? Moreover, he was a firm believer in his own strength. No matter how strong puppets were, they were still external objects, unlike alchemy, wherein the alchemical pills he concocted could at least be used to strengthen himself. Shui Yenyu, though, wanted to take a look and see if she had talent in this area. However, she was soon dissuaded by Ling Han. He had not dismissed his worries just because of this, so to avoid any accidents, it was best if the two of them did not separate. He pulled Shui Yenyu with him out of the manor. By now, they would not have any reason to keep detaining him in the manor, right? Brother Ling and Miss Shui wished to go out. When they came to the doors of the manor, they saw Biyu Zhangyun approach them, riding on a black ape. That made Ling Han even begin to suspect whether these people lost their legs as well, just like Peiji. Otherwise, why would they be riding on puppets all day long? That's right. We're going out for a walk since it's so rare to see such beautiful scenery, Ling Han answered, smiling. Hee, then let me accompany you both. Chapter 1022 Malice of the Puppets. Chapter 1022 Malice of the Puppets. Whether Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were willing or otherwise, Biyu Zhangyun was obviously determined to go with them. In his words, as the host, he naturally had the duty to accompany his guests and introduce the surroundings to them. He accompanied Ling Han and Shui Yenyu. Wherever they walked to, he would be close behind. He could be considered very cordial, but could also be considered to be monitoring them closely. Initially, Ling Han had been planning to go and look around the various houses in the village, but the moment he left the main road, Biyu Zhangyun would speak up to stop him from progressing further. He would stop them from going over by providing the excuse that the people here did not like being disturbed, and even forbade the couple from talking with the passers-by they saw on the streets. His attempt to conceal things only made it more conspicuous, and caused Ling Han to be even more suspicious. However, because he had no plans to have a complete falling out with the forces of the Island Master, Ling Han did not take any drastic actions. After taking a simple tour around outside, he returned to the manor. Luo Wu and Fan Yong had both gone to seek out Guoshuan to learn the art of puppetry. What if they really had talent in this area? If they returned to the imperial capital after learning this art, their status would definitely advance to another level. One would be able to obtain an influential position in his clan, whereas the other would no longer have to follow Zhao Lun, and could be independent, becoming qualified to establish his own faction. Hence, the two of them were very proactive. At the beginning, Liu Ying did not seem very interested, but afterwards, it seemed like she was moved, and went out constantly. In comparison, Yang Tietching's whole mind was focused on returning, and only swordsmithing existed in Jin Zhuohui's eyes. Meanwhile, Yin Yuanxiang led a secluded life, and had always been very unsociable, whereas Fu Tian had completely no interest in areas outside of cultivation. Day after day passed. Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Liu Ying simply did not return, as if they had become addicted to learning the art of puppetry. By the 7th day, Guo Xiuwen came to invite Ling Han and Shui Yenyu to look at the puppet he was close to finishing. Ling Han did not have any interest in learning puppetry, but was very curious about the uses of puppets. Hence, he agreed readily, and went to the workshop inside the manor with Shui Yenyu. There was a total of 2 workshops here, a big one and a small one. The small workshop was Pei Ji's private area, and even his 5 disciples would have to obtain special permission before they could enter, whereas the big workshop was the very place they arrived. Pei Ji taught his disciples how to build puppets here. Usually, they would practice here as well. The workshop was separated into a considerable number of rooms, and the soundproofing was excellent here. Otherwise, with the constant hammering sounds in the workshop, would the people in other rooms still be capable of thinking in peace? In puppet construction, there is much need for care and attention, from the choice of raw materials to engraving of formation patterns and the filling of true origin stones, Guo Xiuwen introduced as they walked. He led Ling Han and Shui Yenyu into a room which was his personal territory. It was a huge place, and there were various materials and tools laid out all around them. I have been building a human-shaped puppet these few days, and have just about reached the final stage. This time, he was finally not riding on the tiger-shaped puppet anymore, though it was still following close at his side. Merely looking at the back, it was really no different from a real tiger, but from the front, its 2 eyes were obviously too fake. 2 red gems had been inlaid in place of the eyes. They were not real eyeballs. He pointed at a human-shaped puppet, an obsessed expression appearing on his face. This puppet was completely wrapped in white bandages, so it was only clear that this was a human-shaped puppet. However, it was indistinguishable what materials it had been built from. The achievement of a puppeteer would be building a puppet that could be passed off as real. As he touched this semi-finished puppet, he looked excited. He continued, "Please feel free to admire it." He cut open the chest of the puppet. It was completely empty inside, and 12 opposing rib bones could be clearly seen. However, they were not white in color, but rather pale gold. The bones have gone through a special process, and were inlaid with a layer of godly metal. Because the raw materials of a puppet have different levels, the levels of the godly metal are also different. In the case of this puppet, it would be sufficient to use level 3 godly metal. Guo Xiuwen continued to explain to Ling Han and Shui Yenyu as he quickly processed the puppet. "Look, there are formation patterns engraved on each bone. This is extremely crucial. After all, this is not a living creature, and every part could only be activated by depending on the formation patterns. Furthermore, there needs to be comprehensive consideration. Otherwise, the fist could punch out, but the feet would be retreating, and this is naturally unacceptable." Guo Xiuwen was full of zest, and did not care whether Ling Han and Shui Yenyu understood and were interested. He was merely talking excitedly all by himself. The last step is to insert the true origin stones in order to activate the formation patterns. He brought over a dozen true origin stones, then turned to Shui Yenyu, and said, "Miss Shui, would you like to personally insert the true origin stones to activate this puppet?" Shui Yenyu shook her head quickly. Though she knew that it was only a tool, with the idea that it was a human, she naturally felt that doing such a thing was very disgusting. Guo Xiuwen laughed, and did not attempt to persuade her any further. Instead, he said, "No matter what kind of powerful existence, they would have the end and die, and no matter what kind of beautiful woman, she would have the moment when she would wilt and fade." He stuffed the true origin stones into the stomach of the puppet one by one. Then, he stared at Shui Yenyu, his eyes becoming heated. "Miss Shui, you are so beautiful and captivating. With that kind of appearance, and that kind of figure, you should be frozen eternally, and should not age. Otherwise, that would be a sin." "This is unrelated to Brother Guo, I think," Ling Han interrupted. "He, I forgot myself and my manners." Guo Xiuwen quickly apologized as he closed up the chest of the puppet. Naturally, he was not using needle and thread, but rather multiple metal rings which buckled up the chest. Upon a closer look, the other end of the metal rings penetrated into the puppet's spine. "Now, please admire." He took a step back and showed a fanatical expression. Wong, this puppet suddenly snapped its eyes open. Then, it swiftly stood. It seemed to be slightly dazed as it looked around. In that Earth's core cave, once every year or so, a kind of material would seep out. We call it divine mist, and by blending the divine mist into our puppet, an unexpected effect could be induced, such as Guoshuwen related from the sidelines. This puppet suddenly focused on Ling Han, its gaze no longer wandering. In the slits between the bandages, its eyes could be seen to exude the light of a fearful wolf. The human-shaped puppet released a low roar, and kicking out its legs, it suddenly charged towards Ling Han. Its burst of speed was extremely swift. One of its hands stretched out, and it was visible that there were 2 fingers that had not been wrapped in bandages. They were like metal, and the tips of its fingers were incredibly sharp as they exuded a cold light. Ling Han was unafraid, and greeted the incoming attack with a punch. Pang! With that exchange of blows, Ling Han involuntarily took a few steps back, while that puppet merely shook slightly, its figure quickly regaining balance. It released another shrill roar, and charged towards Ling Han once more. Strength on the level of the middle stage of high extreme, or even late stage of high extreme of mountain river tier, Ling Han estimated. As the divine patterns of gravity activated, the puppet suddenly stumbled, and almost fell. Yet Ling Han frowned as well, feeling very strained. His opponent merely had the strength of the high extreme, yet caused him to feel so strained. Then there was only one reason for that, and that was because it was too heavy. The same effect of gravity, taking effect on a stone and a mountain, would naturally expend completely different amounts of energy. He recalled what Guoshuwen had said previously about the frame of the puppet being cast in godly metal. Its weight indeed had to be astonishing. What Ling Han did not understand was why this puppet would attack him when he obviously had not seen Guoshuwen issue any command. Hong! 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 The puppet endlessly attacked Ling Han as if it was determined to kill him. Chapter 1023, The Shocking Truth. Chapter 1023, The Shocking Truth. Stop. Quickly, make it stop. Shui Yenyu shouted at Guoshuwen. She was not worried about Ling Han's safety. As long as this damn pervert could not be insta-killed, then with his recovery abilities, he was an undying existence. However, who would like being the target of attack for no reason? Guoshuwen bared his teeth in a grin, and replied, "Miss Shui, I have not issued any command to attack. It is completely the will of this puppet." "How could that be?" Shui Yenyu asked in fury. "This puppet was built by you, and if it was not by your command, why would it attack? Miss Shui, have you forgotten my earlier words?" Guoshuwen was not the slightest bit angered, and said, a kind of mysterious substance would seep out of the Earth's core cave, and blending it into the puppet would produce an extremely amazing effect. Like what? Shui Yenyu calmed down. Ling Han and that puppet were currently engaged in a fierce battle. For the moment, the battle would not be so easily decided. Hence, she was not anxious. Guoshuwen showed a strange smile, and replied, for example, the materials would retain a part of their memories. Shui Yenyu was confused. What did retain a part of their memories mean? What relation did that have with its attacking Ling Han? Yet a thought streaked through Ling Han's head. This puppet could not pose a threat to him. Hence, he was completely capable of multitasking, fighting the puppet on one side whilst listening in on the conversation between Shui Yenyu and Guoshuwen. Could it be? His eyes turned cold, and he drew out the divine sword, striking fiercely. Shua, 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 shua. A few dozen strikes later, the pieces of cloth flew in all directions, and the bandages covering the puppet's face were torn apart, revealing its concealed face. It's Shui Yenyu's eyes swept over it, and she couldn't help but show an incredibly stunned expression. No, it should be an expression of horror. Guoshuwen showed a smile similar to that of a demon, and replied, that's right, that's right. Just as you can see, the raw materials of this puppet have retained a considerable amount of their memories. Hence, It began its attack even when it had not received any command from me. That puppet was astonishingly Luo Wu. Hiss, he had disappeared for quite a number of days, and had actually been made into a puppet. Or was it that this was a puppet that was merely an imitation of Luo Wu's features? Realization suddenly dawned on Ling Han, and he said, "No wonder you did not allow us to enter into the houses of the villagers, and did not allow us to communicate with the villagers. It's because they are all puppets." Ha 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 ha. Guo Xiuwen laughed loudly, and clapped his hands continuously. That's right, that's right. You have guessed correctly. You really deserve to be praised. After all, there are not many people like you that can understand it with just a little hint. Ling Han dodged and evaded endlessly. Luo Wu was currently attacking him fiercely. When he had been alive, his strongest thought was to kill Ling Han. Hence, after he had been made into a puppet, this had become his unerasable memory. You all are practically deranged. Shui Yenyu rebuked. Now, she was naturally aware that their earlier words were all lies, and they had no intention to prepare a ship for them to leave this island. Instead, they merely wanted to persuade them to stay here. Wrong, wrong. In truth, we only wanted to turn you into an eternal being, Guo Xiuwen said, smiling. Just think, how long would you be able to live? How many people would really be capable of breaking through to the Sun-Moon tier? At most, you would only be able to live a few 100,000 years, but in the end, wouldn't you still have to rot and decay, and return back to the earth? However, after being made into a puppet, you all would retain your current appearance eternally. Miss Shui, you are so captivating, so why don't you retain this kind of beauty eternally? He stared at Shui Yenyu, his eyes becoming fanatical. Hihi, then why don't you make yourselves into puppets? Ling Han broke free of Luo Wu, and charged towards Guo Xiuwen. Ang! The puppet tiger actually released a roar in rage, and the sound wave transformed into multiple circles that oscillated towards Ling Han. Ling Han's charging figure suddenly slowed down, and became slower and slower. The clothes on him were forcefully torn apart by the shockwave. Peng, he was suddenly sent flying. He couldn't help but be shocked. This puppet tiger's abilities had actually reached the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and it could even be a being in the late stage or peak stage. Ha 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 ha, since I have allowed you to discover the secret of this place, how could I have been unprepared? Guo Xiuwen laughed. However, rest assured, all of you will be made into puppets. Just the thought excites me. Having a puppet as beautiful as you, I would not complain no matter how many times I play with you every day. His last words were aimed at Shui Yenyu. Although this had revealed his dark, demented fetish, so what if they found out? The two of them were going to be turned into puppets shortly anyways. Shui Yenyu was both shamed and enraged, and rebuked, disgusting. I promise I will restore you completely. There would not be the slightest distortion. Guo Xiuwen's eyes flickered with an evil light. He had completely no interest in normal beauties. Only after they were made into a cold puppet would they incite his psychotic lust. Not just him, but his master and junior brothers were all such psychos. Who? Both Luo Wu and the puppet tiger were attacking Ling Han fiercely, especially the puppet tiger. Its battle prowess was as high as consummate level. Furthermore, it was not a real living creature, so it had no such thing as vital points. Its tendons and bones had all been rebuilt, so it was practically a beast-shaped weapon in itself. Ling Han activated the divine patterns of gravity, but immediately looked strained. That puppet tiger was even heavier than Luo Wu, and if he wanted the divine patterns of gravity to take effect, it'd be a massive test for Ling Han. With a soft shout from Shui Yenyu, she joined the battle with her sword in hand. Guo Xiuwen, meanwhile, did not make a move. Instead, he merely watched the show from the sidelines with crossed legs, apparently very confident in his creations. Out of these two people, one was in the early stage of the medium extreme, whereas the other was at the peak stage of the low extreme. In theory, just Luo Wu would be enough to suppress them. What more when there was still a puppet tiger that had battle prowess at the late stage of consummate level? He was standing by here merely because he feared that these two puppets would not be holding any punches and accidentally tear Shui Yenyu apart. Very soon, he He looked surprised because he discovered that Ling Han's defenses were indeed quite frightening. He actually managed to still be standing after being on the receiving end of a combined attack of these two powerful puppets, which was inconceivable to him. Ha 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 ha, this really is a fine material gifted by the heavens. His surprise immediately turned into great elation. His physique is incredibly tough, and would be worth having level 5 or even level 6 godly metal to recast his skeleton. Though he is only in the medium extreme of Mountain River tier, I have the confidence to carve formation patterns for the Sun Moon tier on his bones. At that time, he would be a puppet of Sun Moon tier. Ha 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 ha, even Master only possesses 2 pseudo Sun Moon tier puppets, and if I can create a Sun Moon tier puppet, I would be able to replace him, and take hold of all the resources of this place. After killing this man, I will hide him, then lie and say that his body had been too severely damaged, hence it could not be made into a puppet. As a result, I have already gotten rid of his corpse. In any case, Master and my junior brothers only care about this woman, after all. When I have learnt the art of puppetry for the Sun Moon tier, and suddenly erupt, I will become the new owner of this place. Show. Exactly at that moment, Ling Han broke through the siege and charged towards him. To defeat the enemy, their chief had to be captured first. Chapter 1024 Absorbed. Chapter 1024 Absorbed. Guo Xiaowen didn't move, yet the puppet tiger roared as it hurriedly leaped before Ling Han. Shoo, shoo, shoo. A ring of tiger teeth flew out, transforming into 24 daggers. Pu, 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 pu. This puppet tiger had a battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level, so even Ling Han was no match for it. 24 tiger teeth instantly pierced into his body, causing blood to gush from his wounds. Even though his physique was extraordinarily sturdy, it was still unavoidable that he would be wounded by an opponent who had a battle prowess at the consummate level. After all, there was a huge gulf between each sub-minor level of the immortal levels. The puppet tiger sucked in a powerful breath as it attempted to retrieve the teeth that it had spat out. In your dreams, Ling Han said with a sneer. With a thought, his divine sense wrapped around the 24 dagger-like teeth, and instantly absorbed them into the Black Tower. There was no martial intent on the teeth, so it was extremely easy for Ling Han to place them into the Black Tower. What? Guo Xiaowen's eyes widened in shock and surprise. How is this possible? The biggest flaw of puppets was that they didn't possess any self-awareness. Thus, it was extremely easy to place them into spatial spirit tool. However, the method to mitigate this flaw was also extremely simple. That was, one could simply transform the body of the puppets into spatial spirit tools as well. Indeed, only great elites at the Genesis tier could forge spatial god tools. But spatial spirit tools? Such tools were widely available and, with a little effort, could be forged by cultivators at the Shattering Void tier. Starting from the Mountain River tier, creating a small and unstable space really couldn't be any easier. It was common sense that one spatial spirit tool couldn't absorb another. This wasn't due to storage volume, but rather due to the quality of such tools. Meanwhile, regardless of whether it was the puppet tiger or the tiger teeth that it had spat out, all of these contained an independent microspace within them. The reason for this was naturally to prevent others from absorbing them into a spatial spirit tool. But now, the 24 tiger teeth had vanished in the air. Guo Xiaowen racked his brains in an attempt to make sense of the situation, yet due to his limited cultivation level and knowledge, how could he ever suspect that it was a spatial god tool? Thus, he could only wallow in his shock and disbelief. Ang! The puppet tiger roared angrily, and swiped its paws at Ling Han as it ferociously lunged toward him. Ling Han also came to a sudden realization. It could be said that the Black Tower was a natural nemesis of puppets. As puppets didn't have any will or martial intent, he would be able to absorb them into the Black Tower simply by wrapping his divine sense around them. Ha ha! This is wonderful. He gazed at the puppet tiger, even clasping his hands behind his back as he did so. His air of arrogance was already soaring through the heavens. Meanwhile, however, his divine sense was already expanding toward the puppet tiger like a net. The speed of the puppet tiger's lunge was incredible, and any other cultivator at the medium extreme would definitely be ripped to shreds before they could even wrap their divine sense around the puppet tiger's body. After all, there was a gulf of 2 minor levels between them. Moreover, even if they were able to wrap the puppet tiger with their divine sense, it was very likely that it would be able to rip through it. However, the strength of Ling Han's divine sense was far above his cultivation level, and it had even more so become tremendously tough after being tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. "You're seeking death," Guo Xiaowen screeched. He pointed at the puppet, and said, "Kill that person. Still, be careful not to obliterate his body. Otherwise, it'll be a pain to piece it back together." The puppet tiger lunged over. Shua. It vanished. Pu. Guo Xiaowen was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of his head. His mouth gaped open, and even his tongue was shuddering slightly. It disappeared. It was a puppet at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. And it disappeared soundlessly just like that. "I'm not dreaming, am I? Xiao." At this moment, Luo Wu pushed Shui Yenyu back with a punch, and charged toward Ling Han. Although he had received a command to kill both Ling Han and Shui Yenyu, his memories from his previous life still affected him, causing him to harbor a stronger hostility toward Ling Han. Thus, he was determined to kill Ling Han before he killed Shui Yenyu. "Retreat! Retreat!" Guo Xiaowen shouted frantically. He had already become aware of Ling Han's uncanny abilities. Ling Han turned his head around to glance at Luo Wu. He had always planned to kill Luo Wu, yet Luo Wu's fate right now was probably even worse than a simple death had already died, yet he was still being commanded around like a dog. Ling Han shook his head. Such a person didn't deserve his sympathy. He was merely sighing about fate. Luo Wu was only a puppet right now, so of course his decision-making couldn't compare to that of a real person. Although Guo Xiaowen had issued a command, Luo Wu had already launched an attack. Thus, he would naturally have to complete this attack before retreating. "Xiao." Luo Wu also vanished. Ling Han turned around to smile at Guo Xiaowen, and said, "There's only you and me left now." Guo Xiaowen trembled in fright. Generally speaking, alchemists, formation cultivators, and weaponsmiths all had a common flaw. That was, their battle prowess wasn't high. It would be already quite excellent if their battle prowess was equivalent to their cultivation, while it would be almost impossible for them to possess a battle prowess that exceeded their rank. The reason for this was simple. They spent most of their time and effort on areas other than martial arts, so how could they increase their battle prowess? If this were not the case, it would be far too unfair to others. Guo Xiaowen was no exception to this trend. However, he was a puppeteer, and he had been protected by 2 puppets just then. Moreover, the puppet tiger had possessed a battle prowess at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. That being the case, what did it matter whether his own battle prowess was powerful or not? The puppets were the root of his confidence. Now, however, both of his puppets had vanished mysteriously and without as much as a peep. This baffled him, and also terrified him. In addition, his cultivation level was only at the late stage of the medium extreme, so he truly didn't have any confidence in his own battle prowess. More importantly, the soundproofing ability of this room was far too good. No one would hear his cries for help even if he screamed at the top of his lungs. His only hope was to escape from this place. "I'll make a run for it." He wasn't good at hiding his intentions, and his eyes drifted toward the door as this thought flashed through his mind. He immediately made a dash for the door, hoping he could escape and call reinforcements. Now that it had come to this, his initial thoughts of hiding Ling Han and refining him into a puppet of the Sun-Moon tier had naturally disappeared as well. He would consider these matters after escaping from here. To his surprise, Ling Han didn't pursue him. "Excellent," he exclaimed in his mind. A delighted smile stretched across his face as he drew closer and closer to the door. "Xiao." A cold glint shot over. Guo Xiaowen shrieked in pain as he viciously face-planted into the floor. He turned around, only to see that there was a wound on his leg. He had no idea what it was caused by, yet it was clear that several meridians and tendons in his thigh had been snapped. This damage was naturally caused by the annihilating Dragon Star arrow, an attack that was as quick as light. Guo Xiuwen forcefully endured the agonizing pain as he frantically crawled up and limped toward the door. There was only one thought racing through his mind right now, and that was to escape. I overestimated you. Ling Han leaped over and extended his hand toward Guo Xiuwen's head. Don't come over, Guo Xiuwen screeched. He swatted his hands toward Ling Han. His battle prowess was only SOSO. In fact, it was slightly lower than his cultivation level. Ling Han shook his head. Guo Xiuwen's counterattacks and struggles were completely useless in the face of his overwhelming power, and he was able to capture him with a single move. Come, tell me about your legless master. He hadn't planned to become enemies with Pei Ji before. However, it was inevitable that they would end up battling each other now that Pei Ji's disciple had already revealed his true nature. Thus, Ling Han had to seize this opportunity to learn about his opponent's abilities. Chapter 1025 Aura of the Demon Master. Chapter 1025 Aura of the Demon Master. Why you can't kill me, otherwise, my master will never forgive you, Guo Xiuwen said shakily. Ling Han shook his head and said, I thought that someone as freakish and ruthless as you would also be ruthless toward themselves. How are you so cowardly? Ling Han threw Luo Wu's corpse aside. It was genuinely a corpse now, as the true origin stones inside had already been extracted and the formations carved into it destroyed. Apart from its bones being relatively sturdy, this corpse had little difference from other ordinary corpses. You created this puppet, am I correct? Ling Han pointed at the corpse and continued, you were ruthless enough to dig the organs out from others, yet you're afraid of suffering a similar fate. Guo Xiuwen shuddered in fright and frantically explained, oh, it's different. That's only a piece of raw material, not a human. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Guo Xiuwen's outlook on life was already completely twisted. He was clearly a coward, yet he was somehow able to commit such disgusting atrocities. Ling Han slapped him across the face and said, I don't want to read your disgusting memory, so answer my questions. Shui Yenyu walked over and placed her sword on Guo Xiuwen's neck. What's the point of speaking with such people? They're better off dead. No. No. Guo Xiuwen was extremely terrified. Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'll tell you everything that you want to know. Please don't kill me. The sound of pissing could be heard as Guo Xiuwen shrieked in terror. He had wet himself in fright. Shui Yenyu hurriedly pinched her nose as she retreated into the distance. Ling Han also wanted to give him a good hard kick. There truly weren't many people who were as cowardly as him. Tell me everything you know, he said coldly. Guo Xiuwen nodded vigorously and said, as you wish, as you wish. I'll speak, I'll tell you everything. He started to tell a story. He had already become Pei Ji's disciple over 30,000 years ago. At that time, he was only 6 or 7 years old. Perhaps he was 2 years older than that, or perhaps he was 2 years younger than that. It was too long ago, so his memory of that time had already become hazy. In these 30,000 years, he had learned martial arts and puppet making from Pei Ji. During that time, Pei Ji had also taken in 4 more disciples. Guo Xiuwen had initially been unaware of how he had become Pei Ji's disciple, yet he saw a shadow of himself on his 4 junior brothers' bodies. Although this island was isolated, the sea was no stranger to all kinds of unforeseen circumstances. There were tsunamis and there were pirates, and in the decades and centuries that passed, people would occasionally drift over to this island. However, none of them could escape the fate of being refined into a puppet by Pei Ji. Sometimes, there were children among those who arrived, and Pei Ji would choose a few talented ones to become his disciples. If he later discovered that there was no value in raising them, he would kill them without mercy. Thus, Guo Xiuwen deduced that he himself was also the descendant of someone who had drifted here. His parents had been killed by Pei Ji, yet due to his relatively good talent, he was spared by Pei Ji and even taken in as a disciple. He had been too young at that time, so he was unable to remember any of these events. Or perhaps he had been traumatized so much that these memories were suppressed in some hidden corner of his brain. However, even if he knew the truth, he still didn't dare develop any shred of hatred toward Pei Ji. After all, Pei Ji had 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets. Even if he and the other 4 disciples were to team up, they would still be easily insta-killed by these 2 puppets. Peiji was an outstanding puppeteer, yet it seemed like he had experienced some dramatic event that made him uninterested in developing his talents. Instead, he chose to become a tyrant on this island, someone who brought nightmares to those who drifted to this place. As for Peiji's background and history, Guoxiuwen knew absolutely nothing. He merely knew that the colossal pit was extremely mysterious. A peculiar mist-like matter would drift out from it every year, and if it was fused into a puppet's body, it would cause the puppet to become much stronger than before. Moreover, creating a puppet usually took several months, yet with the help of the divine mist, this time would be compressed into a mere few days. Divine mist. Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he said, "Where is it? Show me." Guoxiuwen trembled nervously as he crawled up and opened a drawer. He retrieved a jade vial, and said, "The divine mist is enclosed in here." He lowered his head to hide the viciousness that was flashing across his eyes. This divine mist was extremely helpful in creating puppets, but it would corrode one's divine sense if they were to directly inhale it. It would transform one into a puppet-like tool whose only aim was to kill. The only difference was that they wouldn't listen to commands. Once he dealt with Ling Han, Guoxiuwen wouldn't be afraid of the remaining woman in the least. Ling Han accepted the vial, but didn't immediately open it up. Instead, he tossed Guoxiuwen into the Black Tower, and then entered with Shui Yenyu. He was about to examine an unknown substance, so it was naturally the safest to do so in the Black Tower. "Small tower, can you determine what this is?" Ling Han tossed the jade vial into the air. "Pa." With a thought, the jade vial instantly exploded into pieces. A wisp of black mist instantly streaked into the air and shifted into all kinds of forms. It transformed into the shape of a beast, then a bird, and then a human who had a single horn on their head and a tail extending from their rear. Small Tower appeared, and exclaimed in unison with Ling Han, "Demonic Qi." This was definitely demonic Qi. Ling Han had seen this substance in the lower realm before. Although there was only a wisp of it, it was far more powerful than the aura of the Azura Demon Emperor. That's right. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and the Azura Demon Emperor was immediately brought before him. This demon had been confined in the Black Tower this entire time. My respects to Master. Master's fortune is shared with heaven, and Master's lifespan is eternal and boundless. The Azura Demon Emperor was extremely obsequious, and his behavior was completely typical of a base person. He glanced at Shui Yenyu, and instantly dropped down on his knees. My respects to Master's wife. Master has such refined taste. Master's wife is as beautiful as a celestial maiden, and her aura is brimming with nobility and elegance. She's definitely a beauty who only appears once every hundreds of millions of years. Shui Yenyu was completely dumbstruck. How can there be such an obsequious person? Does he have no face? Ling Han humphed, and said, "Enough with the nonsense. Hurry up and check this demonic Qi out. Tell me about its origin." "As you wish, as you wish." The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded and bowed before turning his gaze to the wisp of demonic Qi. His smoke-like body involuntarily quaked, and he stuttered, This is a wisp of demonic Qi from a demon master." "Demon master?" Ling Han glared at him, and said, "Explain more clearly." The Azura Demon Emperor was completely void of any temper now, and he immediately started to nod and bow again. In the immortal realm, those who have reached the Genesis tier are referred to as saints. In the netherworld, however, those who have reached the Genesis tier are referred to as demon masters. Shui Yenyu was astonished by the sight of the Azura Demon Emperor, and she interjected, "This is a demon from the netherworld." "This lowly demon is indeed from the netherworld." As expected, the eyes of Master's wife radiate with a brilliance that sees through all of my thoughts. The Azura Demon Emperor flattered Shui Yenyu relentlessly. Ling Han was astounded by the revelation. This wisp of aura was left by a demon master whose rank is equivalent to the Genesis tier? Hang on. Wasn't there a suppressed passageway in the flame cave of the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm? And wasn't there a being who referred to itself as Demon Master Zhan Yi trying to break through the passageway and enter this realm? Gasp. He had actually quarreled with a great elite at the Genesis tier. The beauty of Master's wife is like the sun in the sky that blinds one with its dazzling radiance. The aura of Master's wife is like the brilliant moon whose chastity makes one drop their head in shame. The Azura demon emperor knew no shame as he continued to praise and flatter Shui Yenyu. However, at some point in time, he suddenly lunged toward the wisp of demonic qi in the air. Ha 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 ha. Once I fuse with this wisp of demonic qi, my power will soar rapidly, and I'll recover a battle prowess of the mountain river tier. Killing you too will be as easy as slaughtering defenseless chickens. The Azura demon emperor laughed excitedly as it neared the wisp of demonic qi. Chapter 1026, Completely Subjugated. Chapter 1026, Completely Subjugated. The Azura demon emperor was a coward who was extremely afraid of death. In order to stay alive, he had even kneeled down to lick the feet of Ling Han, who had only been at the heaven tier at that time. However, as the saying went, a great being knew when to yield and when not to yield. The Azura demon emperor had yielded for so long because he was waiting for a chance to rise up. And now, his chance had finally come. His battle prowess had fallen dramatically after he traveled through the barrier between the two realms and forcefully entered the small world. His battle prowess had fallen to 15 stars of the shattering void tier, and he knew that he was no match for a freak like Ling Han. However, his battle prowess would instantly soar back to the low extreme of the mountain river tier if he were able to absorb this wisp of demonic qi. So what if Ling Han was supremely talented and freakish? Would he be able to defend against the power of an immortal-level cultivator? There was absolutely no way. There was a look of intoxication on the Azura demon emperor's face as he arrived before the wisp of demonic qi. He would receive tremendous benefits if he were able to absorb this wisp of demon master level demon qi, as there was a shred of a demon master's comprehension contained within it. To beings of the immortal realm, this wisp of aura was no different from a fatal poison. To beings of the netherworld, however, this wisp of aura was a supreme tonic. Moreover, it was actually a good thing that there was only a wisp of this aura. Otherwise, if there were more, the Azura demon emperor wouldn't dare absorb it. If he absorbed too much, he would definitely be crushed by the overwhelming power contained within it. After all, the Genesis tier was far too powerful. I'm only an inch away. Half an inch. Heh. Why can't I advance any further? The Azura demon emperor turned around in shock, only to find that he was already firmly gripped in Ling Han's hand. He was unable to move forward even a single millimeter. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Not bad. Your courage has grown quite a lot. Master, you jest." The Azura demon emperor was a mist-like being who didn't have a physical body, and he immediately elongated his body to grab onto Ling Han's thigh. "I was merely overcome by a rush of stupid impulsiveness. Master, just pretend that I was spewing *T. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "You really want to absorb this wisp of demonic qi? I beg for your bestowal, Master." There was an obsequious smile plastered to the Azura demon emperor's face as he spoke. "Ling Han, don't fall for his tricks," Shui Yenyu warned. This demon emperor was far too two-faced. The Azura demon emperor's heart jolted when he heard this. Ling Han seemed like he were about to grant his wish, yet Shui Yenyu's warning would potentially change his mind. "Fine, I'll bestow this demonic qi unto you," Ling Han said with a smile. The demonic qi was merely a poisonous substance to him, so it held little value. He released his grip on the Azura demon emperor. The Azura demon emperor was overcome with exuberance, and he immediately opened his mouth and swallowed the wisp of demonic qi. Boom! His body expanded like a balloon, yet he quickly shrunk back down again, returning to his normal size. He didn't appear any different, yet they could clearly sense that the Azura demon emperor's aura was rising rapidly. He broke through to the immortal level in the blink of an eye, releasing a vast and profound aura. Peak stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Ha 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 ha. The Azura demon emperor immediately started to roar with laughter. There was a smug look on his face, and he said, "Ling Han, oh Ling Han, you truly are stupid beyond belief. You actually allowed me to regain my strength. Today, I'll show you what immortal level power truly looks like. Shui Yenyu was transfixed with astonishment. She wasn't astonished by the Azura Demon Emperor's power, but rather by the shamelessness that he displayed. His attitude toward them had flipped faster than one could flip the page of a book. He had still been calling them master and master's wife just a moment ago, yet he was suddenly so arrogant and smug right now. Did he know no shame? Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "Your strength has recovered to the peak stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier?" "Huh? How do you know?" The Azura Demon Emperor was slightly surprised. It was only normal that Ling Han knew that he had reached the immortal level. However, him being able to determine his cultivation level appeared extremely uncanny. An ominous feeling welled up in his heart. Ling Han sighed, and said, "Little Azura, how many years have you been in here for?" "You have no right to refer to me as Little Azura. I'm the Azura Demon Emperor," the Azura Demon Emperor replied angrily. He had only bowed down to Ling Han because great beings all knew when to yield and when not to yield. Did they think that he was truly shameless and cowardly? Of course he wasn't. Ling Han continued, "You've been in here for so long that you've already turned stupid. Did you really believe that my strength wouldn't advance after so many years? Why you?" The Azura Demon Emperor's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. This brat was a freak who couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han smiled faintly and unleashed his aura. An aura that was far more powerful than the Azura Demon Emperor's aura instantly swept through the air. "Master!" The Azura Demon Emperor immediately threw himself to Ling Han's feet and grabbed onto his leg. He nudged his head against Ling Han's leg, and said, "This underling missed you immensely. Not seeing you for one day felt like being apart for 3 full years." Shui Yenyu grimaced in speechlessness. "Weren't you pretty aggressive just then?" Ling Han asked casually. I was experiencing a bout of schizophrenia just then." The Azura Demon Emperor suddenly became serious, and said, "I'm sure you're aware of it, Master, but when someone is locked up for too long, they'll slowly go insane and even develop personality disorders. That was exactly what happened to me. However, please be at ease, Master. This underling has already destroyed the other personalities. From now on, this underling will be your most loyal dog. If you tell me to walk east, I definitely won't walk west." Ling Han gazed at him, and said, "I've already given you 2 chances. If the Azura Demon Emperor could sweat, he would definitely be drenched in cold sweat right now. Anyhow, he still wiped his forehead out of habit. After all, he had resided in a human's body for a long time, and was already accustomed to such an action. "Rest assured, Master, I definitely won't disobey you for a 3rd time," the Azura Demon Emperor vowed. This time, he had genuinely been terrified by Ling Han. Only a few years had passed, yet Ling Han had already advanced into the immortal level from the heaven tier. Moreover, he had done more than just advance into the mountain river tier. He had already reached the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. If he continued at this rate, he would be able to reach the Genesis tier in a few thousand years, or perhaps only a few centuries. There would be no harm in following such a master. In fact, there would instead be an abundance of opportunities. The Azura Demon Emperor definitely had a pragmatic personality. He instantly came to a decision in his mind. He was willing to be an underling, an obedient dog, as long as Ling Han could maintain his rate of growth. He knew that even if he were a dog, he would still be an extremely noble and powerful dog. Even those that were several times more powerful than him would have to show him utmost respect. Ling Han nodded, and said, "This is your last chance. There will be no 3rd time. Thank you for your kindness, Master. Thank you for your kindness." The Azura Demon Emperor was overcome with delight. Ling Han planned to completely subjugate the Azura Demon Emperor, as the unique attributes that he possessed were actually quite useful. For example, he could enter and control the body of a puppet. "I'll hand this puppet to you. Enter its body, and fight for me in the future." Ling Han retrieved the puppet tiger. The Azura Demon Emperor didn't care in the least whether he entered the body of a human or the body of a dog. He immediately heeded Ling Han's command and entered the puppet tiger. The puppet tiger instantly started to move. Master, this puppet is at the consummate level," he exclaimed in excitement. One had to realize that, at his peak, he only had a cultivation level at the medium extreme. He was still a long way off from reaching the consummate level. Are you not satisfied? I'm satisfied. Very satisfied. As satisfied can be. The Azura Demon Emperor was shaking with excitement. Ling Han nodded, and said, as long as you remain honest and do my bidding, I can even give you puppets at the Sun-Moon tier and Heavenly Body tier in the future. In fact, finding Genesis tier demonic chi for you to absorb isn't out of the question, either. Master, you're too kind. I'm willing to be your dog and slave. The Azura Demon Emperor drifted out of the puppet tiger and latched onto Ling Han's leg again. This time, he didn't dare to oppose Ling Han even though he had received a powerful puppet that was at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. After all, this was a puppet that had been captured by Ling Han. Gasp. Master is so powerful. He's even able to crush beings at the consummate level. Chapter 1027 Abhorrent Practices. Chapter 1027 Abhorrent Practices. Ling Han grabbed Guoxiuwen. He was still unconscious after being knocked out by Ling Han's 7-kill subduing soul technique previously. This secret technique was naturally more deadly to those of a lower cultivation level. In fact, cultivators at the low extreme could be easily killed by it. Guoxiuwen's eyes shot open as he was slapped awake. However, he was completely stupefied by what he saw. Where is this? How long was I unconscious for us to have reached some unfamiliar place so far away from the island? Why you? He was almost scared to death upon seeing Ling Han as the latter was completely unharmed. Did he not open the jade vial? No. I can clearly see the fragments of the jade vial in the distance, so he definitely opened it. Are you disappointed? Ling Han asked with a smile. Tell me, why should I not kill you? I'm also a victim. I was forced into doing this, Guoxiuwen said in a shaky voice. He pushed all of the blame onto Pei Ji. Ling Han shook his head, and said, perhaps you were forced to in the beginning. However, I don't see a shred of remorse in your eyes right now. You're no different from Pei Ji anymore. Little Azura, kill him. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately entered the puppet tiger and raised its tiger head, and said, as you command, Master. Guoxiuwen was both shocked and confused. This puppet tiger had been created by him, and he had also used it as his steed for a long time. It could be said that he knew it through and through. However, this puppet tiger actually opened its mouth to speak just then. This almost frightened him to death. Ever since he remembered, he had never set foot outside this island, so it was only normal that he wasn't aware of the matters regarding the netherworld. As such, he found this situation completely unfathomable. You're also a puppeteer. He was convinced that he had figured out the truth. Ling Han was definitely a puppeteer who was numerous times more skilled than him, thus allowing him to easily capture his puppet and even give it the ability to speak. His supreme skills made the puppet tiger extremely lively, as if it were truly sentient and intelligent. The Azura Demon Emperor leaped over and snapped its jaws shut, crushing Guoxiuwen's neck with a single bite. Guoxiuwen's divine sense was also obliterated by this overwhelming attack, and the life drained from him in the blink of an eye. Stay by my side and don't attack without my command, Ling Han said. The Azura Demon Emperor was overcome with joy. Is Master planning to let me out? I'm so touched. Ling Han waved his hand, and the 2 people and 1 tiger immediately appeared in the workshop. This is the immortal realm, the Azura Demon Emperor said in astonishment. Although he had already guessed that Ling Han had arrived in the immortal realm after learning that his cultivation level was at the medium extreme of the Mountain River tier, he was still astonished when he experienced the completely different regulations of heaven and earth and the rich spiritual chi for himself. Only a few years had passed, yet Ling Han had already advanced into the immortal level. Moreover, he could even take out a puppet at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier with a casual wave of his hand. This astonished him immensely. Lead the way, Ling Han commanded. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded, and said, as you wish, Master. Now was the time for him to perform. He had to show his master just how loyal he was. He immediately opened the door and exited the workshop. Search every single room, Linghan said. Peng. The Azura Demon Emperor rammed open the door of the neighboring room. However, apart from piles of tools and materials, there was only an empty platform in the middle of the room. There wasn't anyone there. They left the room, and the Azura Demon Emperor rammed open the door of another room. A distressed expression appeared on Shui Yenyu's face. She immediately turned around and started to vomit. The layout of this room was identical to that of the previous two rooms, with piles of tools and materials sitting everywhere. There was also a platform in the middle of this room, yet unlike the other two rooms, there was a corpse that had been cut into 8 pieces resting on top of it. It was Fan Yong. He hadn't been refined into a puppet yet, and thus his expression of terror from before his death was still frozen onto his face. The sight was enough to send shivers through one's body. In fact, Linghan held a suspicion that Fan Yong had still been alive when he had been cut into 8 pieces. How could one not be petrified as they watched their body being dissected, their organs being dug out, and their blood flowing out drop by drop? It was no surprise that the expression on his face was so twisted. This bunch of monsters, Shui Yenyu said angrily. Linghan unleashed his divine patterns of flame and burned Fan Yong's corpse into ashes. Although there was strong animosity between them, Fan Yong's crimes also disappeared along with his death. Next room. The Azura Demon Emperor obediently led the way. He knew that his master was in an extremely bad mood right now, with even his tone being icy cold as if it had seeped out from an ice cave. Meanwhile, he found these sights to be extremely normal and unsurprising. Wasn't it just a dismembered corpse? The netherworld had tons of things that were hundreds or even thousands of times crueler and bloodier than this. Peng. He rammed his way into the 4th room. There was a living person. How did you people enter? Huh? Isn't this senior brother's puppet tiger? Why is it with you guys? The person in the room was Tong Yulong, and he was currently busy with making his puppet. He had only turned around because he had heard a disturbance. A female body that was being processed lay on the platform that was already painted red with blood. Her slender legs and arms had already been severed from her torso, and her abdomen had also been sliced open. Tong Yulong was in the process of digging out her organs. This female was none other than Liu Ying. To their surprise, she still hadn't drawn her last breath yet. Her eyes slowly focused on Linghan, and her lips trembled a little. However, she was unable to make a single sound. This didn't matter, though, as Linghan could guess what she wanted to say: kill the monsters on this island. Also, kill her and free her from this world of pain. Kill him. Linghan commanded coldly. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately lunged toward Tong Yulong. Roar. A puppet wolf appeared and blocked the Azura Demon Emperor's advance. This puppet was also at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, meaning that its battle prowess was no lower than that of the Azura Demon Emperor. Linghan took a few steps forward and cast his divine sense out like a net. Shoo! The puppet wolf instantly disappeared from the room. Pu. Like Guoxiuan from before, Tong Yulong's eyes also bulged out in shock, his tongue hanging out in disbelief. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor had already arrived before him and swatted his paw over. Pa. His head was obliterated, and the headless corpse crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Linghan swung his sword and destroyed the remnants of Liu Ying's life force. Liu Ying gave him a grateful look as she shut her eyes one final time. Then, Linghan waved his hand and burned Liu Ying's corpse to ashes. They entered the 5th room and discovered another victim. Yang Taicheng. This sturdy man had also been dismembered, with each of his limbs immersed in some sort of silver liquid. Unlike Liu Ying, however, his life force had already completely vanished. He had already been dead for quite some time. He had most likely been dismembered sometime today, as Linghan had still seen him in the morning. Linghan only had killing intent for Luo Wu and Fan Yong, and he didn't have any good impression of Liu Ying, either. After all, she had come here to kill him. However, he harbored great respect for Yang Taicheng, as the latter could push his emotions aside and firmly follow his principles. There were few people who could do this. Moreover, they had battled side by side before, and he had even entrusted his back to Yang Taicheng at one time. Rest in peace, Brother Yang. I'll definitely slay those monsters to appease your spirit, Ling Han said solemnly. Then, he turned around and said, let's return to our residence. Perhaps we can still save the others. Chapter 1028, Nemesis of Puppets. Chapter 1028, Nemesis of Puppets. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu hurried toward the courtyard that they had been living in. Just as they left the workshop, they saw Quida and Yin Yuanxiang walking over together. Quida was extremely baffled when he saw Ling Han and Shui Yenyu walk over, especially since the puppet tiger was following behind them. What's going on? Weren't they meant to capture these two people? What's with this situation? What on earth happened? This doesn't make any sense at all. Die! Ling Han roared. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately charged toward Quida. It had to be said that he was quite smart. Ling Han hadn't explicitly said whom he wanted to kill, yet the Azura Demon Emperor directly chose to target Quida. He probably thought that, as a man, Ling Han wouldn't want him to kill a beauty like Yin Yuanxiang. Quida's puppet bear leaped out to battle with the Azura Demon Emperor. Brother Ling, what's the meaning of this? Yin Yuanxiang asked in confusion. Oh, you can thank me later, Ling Han said calmly. Peiji and his 5 disciples wanted to refine all of us into puppets, and Luo Wu, Fan Yong, Liu Ying, and Brother Yang have all been killed already. What a load of bullsh*t. Quida retorted. Lady Yin, don't listen to his nonsense. He's simply accusing me with no evidence at all. I invited you because I sincerely want you to witness the beauty of newly refined puppets. I would never fathom bringing harm to you. Guo Xiuwen said the exact same thing, Ling Han said with a cold chuckle. He walked over and directly absorbed the puppet bear into the Black Tower. He didn't have the patience to argue with Quida anymore. Quida and Yin Yuanxiang were both astounded by Ling Han's actions. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor charged over and quickly swatted Quida to death. Without their puppets, the battle prowess of puppeteers was truly too terrible to look at. Ling Han shook his head when saw that Yin Yuanxiang was still lost in a daze, and said, I'll explain when we gather everyone together. They hurried back to where the courtyards were located. Ning Tai and Biyu Zhangyun both appeared and tried to capture Ling Han, yet both of them were swatted to death by the Azura Demon Emperor after having their puppets easily stripped away by Ling Han. Peng, peng, peng. Ling Han and the others knocked on the doors of the courtyards and called Jin Zhehui and Fu Tian out. They were still in their courtyards as they were most likely on the bottom of the list, and thus it wasn't their turn to be killed and refined yet. Meanwhile, they were also completely oblivious to what had happened around them. Ling Han recounted what they had seen just then, and the expressions of Jin Zhehui and the 2 others instantly changed drastically. I'm going to kill that old bastard. Fu Tian roared furiously. The veins on his body suddenly bulged, and the hair on his head also stood on ends as a devastating aura emanated from his body. What do you two think? Ling Han turned to look at Yin Yuanxiang and Jin Zhehui. Kill them all, Jin Zhehui said as he waved his fist. Yin Yuanxiang nodded, but remained silent. Very well. Ling Han drummed his fingers on the table and said, there's only the old man left right now. Puppeteers relied on their puppets to battle, yet he was coincidentally the most powerful nemesis of puppets. Moreover, the Azura Demon Emperor could enter and control any puppet. Thus, they would be able to turn their enemies' weapons into their weapons. So, even if Peiji owned 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets, and even if he was an elite at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier himself, Ling Han was still completely unafraid of him. Instead, he was brimming with confidence. The group of 5 set out together and started to search for Peiji. However, they looked around for a long time, but were still unable to find him. There's still a small workshop. Peiji is definitely in there. Ling Han recalled Guo Xiuwen's words, and started to head toward the small workshop. This was genuinely a small workshop. It was 9 meters by 9 meters, and its door was securely shut. Fu Tian took a deep breath before ferociously charging toward the door. Peng! He slammed into the door like a powerful meteor. The door instantly shuddered and crashed to the ground. Meanwhile, Fu Tian was also pushed back. However, he simply shook his head and quickly recovered his best condition immediately. The door sent puffs of dust billowing through the air as it crashed down, and they could vaguely see Pei Ji resting in the embrace of a woman in the room. There was a look of intoxication and gentleness in his eyes as he caressed the face and breast of the woman. However, the female was clearly a puppet. Although her body was extremely lifelike, there were two black and lifeless gems where her eyes should have been. Since you've arrived here, it means that my disciples are all dead. Pei Ji wasn't flustered, and had the female puppet turn him around to face Ling Han and the others. A look of contempt flashed across his face, and he scolded, "What a bunch of useless trash. Old bastard, I'm going to murder you." Fu Tian was the first to charge over, yet the female puppet merely extended an arm toward him. It seemed as if the sky were about to collapse, and it appeared as if the hand could expand without limit. Pa! The palm struck down, and Fu Tian was instantly sent flying. Blood spurted through the air as he collapsed to the ground and fainted. He didn't die after facing that attack. Pei Ji was clearly a little surprised, and said, "I underestimated you people. No wonder you were able to kill all of my disciples. However, since you've come here, don't dream of leaving alive." He whistled loudly, and a middle-aged man instantly walked out from some dark corner. He was also a puppet. However, the appearance of this puppet was quite harrowing, as there were sabers and swords sticking out from all over its body, making it look like an echidna. "Kill them," Pei Ji commanded coldly. He then turned around and buried his head into the female puppet's chest, gnawing at it greedily. "Freak," Jin Zhuhui said with a grimace. Was this old man a fucking necrophile? Pei Ji was still lost in lust, yet he suddenly noticed that something was off. Why was it suddenly so quiet? He turned around, and he almost wet himself in shock. It disappeared. The middle-aged male puppet had vanished. It wasn't in the sky, nor was it on the ground. Where the fuck had it gone? One had to realize that it was a pseudo-sun moon tier puppet. It was just as powerful as the puppet that he was embracing. The Azura demon emperor charged over, and roared, "Die." He had grown quite a bit, and he knew whom to attack even without Ling Han's command as the emperor of obsequiousness. His ability to read the mood was naturally top-notch. The female puppet struck her palm toward the Azura demon emperor. Peng! The Azura demon emperor was instantly sent flying, and even his tiger head had been twisted at an unnatural angle by the force of the strike. The gulf between their battle prowess was far too huge. The female puppet was at the pseudo-sun moon tier, while the puppet tiger was merely at the late stage of the consummate level. "Use this one." Ling Han casually waved his hand, retrieving the middle-aged male puppet and tossing it toward the Azura demon emperor. "Thank you, master." The Azura demon emperor instantly transformed into a burst of demonic chi and entered the middle-aged male puppet's body. Such a powerful feeling. He waved his arms around with a smile, and said, "Using a humanoid body sure is easier." What kind of monstrosity is this? Pei Ji was stunned by the sight of the Azura demon emperor. He had handcrafted this puppet, so how was it captured by that person so easily? And why could it be controlled so easily? "You're a monstrosity. Eat your uncle's attack." The Azura demon emperor charged over again, though he didn't dare refer to himself as emperor anymore. However, he still had the confidence to refer to himself other people's uncle one. The female puppet dashed over, and the two pseudo-sun moon tier puppets immediately became locked in an intense battle. Pei Ji pressed down with his arms and jumped out from the female puppet's embrace. This puppet only knew how to battle, and there was no way that it could ensure his safety. If he was trapped between the two puppets, there was every possibility that he would be smashed into pieces. "Humph. Even if there's only me left, killing you people will still be a piece of cake," he sneered. To everyone's surprise, segments of metal started to extend from the stumps on his severed legs, instantly causing his body to become almost 6 meters tall. Chapter 1029, Scared Away. Chapter 1029, Scared Away. Pei Ji appeared extremely strange right now. He was still a normal person down to his thighs, yet from there on downward, his legs looked like the roots of some old tree. It was a complex entanglement of metal rods, and they lifted him up to become something like a giant. Ha 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 ha. Watch how this old man annihilates you all. Like a gigantic centipede, the countless metal rods started to move and carry him toward Ling Han and the others. Everyone hurriedly dispersed to avoid being knocked over by Pei Ji's strike. Shio, shio, shio. Ling Han unleashed his annihilating Dragon Star arrow and fired several volleys of Origin Power arrows. Some of these Origin Power arrows were silver-white, some were crimson-red, and some were earthen-yellow. The silver-white arrows were ordinary Origin Power arrows, while the crimson-red ones were imbued with the divine patterns of flame, and the earthen-yellow ones were imbued with the divine patterns of gravity. Pei Ji didn't dare face these arrows head-on, so he raised his leg and formed a dense net before his body that was surprisingly able to block the Origin Power arrows. Not only was this net able to block Ling Han's Origin Power arrows, but it was even able to block the attacks from the other people as well. The difference in cultivation level between them was a bit too large. Pei Ji was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level, yet what about Ling Han and the other 4 people? Fu Tian was unconscious. Yin Yuanxiang was at the late stage of the medium extreme, and her battle prowess was at the peak stage. Jin Zhuohui was at the early stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess was also at the early stage. Shui Yenyu was at the peak stage of the low extreme, and her battle prowess was 1 star above her cultivation level. Ling Han was at the early stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess was 5 stars above his cultivation level, though his peak battle prowess could reach 6 stars. Even if they teamed up, they were still no match for Pei Ji. You brats actually dare attack me? You're all seeking death, Pei Ji said with a sneer. Shua. Ling Han cast a net as his body flashed about. He had been preparing the crimson ground locking net this entire time, and he was finally able to fully activate it at this moment. As the net flew out, it became larger and larger. This kind of treasure was naturally able to expand and shrink a great deal. At its limit, it could even envelop a mountain, much less Pei Ji, who was only 6 meters tall. Pei Ji didn't expect this, and the small size of the workshop meant that there was no room for him to hide, either. He was instantly enveloped by the net. What? Why did my power suddenly fall so dramatically? Shock spread across his face as his cultivation level fell to the peak stage of the high extreme. His cultivation level had fallen an entire minor level. One had to realize that as a puppeteer, he didn't possess a powerful battle prowess to begin with. Thus, he was understandably flustered now that his cultivation level had been reduced by an entire minor level. Moreover, the net that trapped him was made out of some peculiar material that he couldn't break free from no matter what. In fact, it even affected his mobility to some degree. He frantically let out a low growl, and the female puppet immediately turned around and grabbed at the crimson ground-locking net. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly chased over, and said, "Stupid B***tch, eat this uncle's saber." He removed a saber that was sticking out of his body and slashed it at the female puppet. The Azura Demon Emperor was a sleazeball, and once he put down his dignity as an elite, his shamelessness truly knew no bounds. His speech would become vile and vulgar. The female puppet simply pushed a palm backward, while her other hand latched onto the crimson ground-locking net and forcefully pulled it up. She was at the pseudo-sun-moon tier, and the overwhelming strength that she possessed allowed her to lift a large portion of the net up. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor's saber slashed into her palm with a deafening clang. Everyone felt as if their eardrums were about to burst, and they were unable to hear anything else. They could only see flashes of dazzling light as the saber continued to clash against the hand. Peng! After a short while, the Azura Demon Emperor was suddenly pushed back. Although both puppets were at the pseudo-sun-moon tier, it was evident that the female puppet was stronger than the male one. Pa, 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 pa. The sound of uncanny footsteps traveled over, and they saw more and more puppets climb out from all kinds of nooks and crannies. These puppets came in all kinds of strange and peculiar forms. Pei Ji pointed through the net, and said, "Ha ha ha. Kill all of those people for me." There was a strong killing intent on his face, and it was clear that he was infuriated with being forced into such a sorry state. There were hundreds of these puppets already, and still more were surging out from all over the room. According to Guo, he had lived on this island for around 30,000 years. With this in mind, Pei Ji had definitely lived here even longer than that. With so much time at his disposal, how many puppets had he managed to create? These puppets could completely be viewed as an army. Although they were lacking in intelligence, they had many other advantages. They had no weak points, no sense of pain, and no fear of death. At this moment, Fu Tian also regained his consciousness, though his battle prowess had fallen dramatically due to his severe injuries. Everyone was shaking with apprehension. There were so many puppets that it was possible that they could drown them to death. Ling Han roared and charged toward the puppets. Shio, 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 shio. Once he broke away from the others, he naturally became the main target of the puppets. Countless attacks streaked toward him. There were slashes from claws, explosions from sound waves, and bullets of black light. Ling Han advanced fearlessly. These puppets were mostly at the low extreme of the mountain river tier, so he didn't even need to defend against their attacks, no matter how thick and relentless they were. He simply unleashed his divine sense, causing the puppets to rapidly vanish wherever he passed. The nemesis of puppets had come. His target was the female puppet, as the Azura Demon Emperor would be freed once he captured her. When that time came, it would be extremely easy for them to suppress Pei Ji. Hurry! Hurry up and get rid of this net for me, Pei Ji screamed in exasperation. A dozen or so puppets grabbed onto the net and tried to pry it open. Meanwhile, Ling Han dashed forward and cast his divine sense toward the female puppet. Then, the female puppet suddenly vanished. Pu. Pei Ji witnessed this sight just as he broke free from the net, and his eyes almost popped out of his head in shock and disbelief. He hadn't seen how the male puppet had vanished, yet just then, he witnessed the full process of the female puppet being captured. Truth be told, he was still completely baffled and unable to comprehend what was happening before him. Legless old man, watch how this uncle slays you. The Azura Demon Emperor roared with laughter as he charged toward Pei Ji. Pei Ji naturally knew how powerful this puppet was. In fright, he shouted, "Block him." Meanwhile, he glared at Ling Han with hatred. This brat had incredibly uncanny abilities, and it seemed as if he were his fated nemesis. Yang Ticheng, the great elite who had a battle prowess at the consummate level, had already been dealt with, so dealing with the remaining people should have been a piece of cake. They should have posed no threat at all, yet they somehow managed to pull off this unimaginable feat. Anyhow, old and experienced as he was, he knew that he couldn't lose his temper and throw his life away here. He immediately turned to flee, not forgetting to say, "Brat, if you pursue me, I can assure you that all of your companions will lose their life." He laughed loudly as he fled into the distance. Ling Han hesitated briefly before turning back around to assist the others in destroying the puppets. Although there was a tremendous number of puppets here, the castaways had the Azura Demon Emperor, who was extremely powerful, as well as Ling Han, who was the nemesis of puppets. Thus, even though the puppets surged toward them in waves, they were easily mowed down like grass being cut. After about 30 minutes, the puppets finally stopped appearing, their numbers decreasing with each puppet that was killed. Chapter 1030, True Culprit. Chapter 1030, True Culprit. With Ling Han the puppet nemesis present, and with the protection of the Azura Demon Emperor, who was an elite at the pseudo-sun moon tier, they were finally able to exterminate all of the puppets. Yin Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhuhui all sighed with emotion. Were it not for Ling Han, it was very likely that they would have all died here. Regardless of how powerful or freakish they were, how could they defeat a puppet at the pseudo-sun moon tier by themselves? Yang Taicheng was a prime example of this. At the mention of Yang Taicheng, everyone sighed in sympathy. He was someone who could stick by his principles no matter the situation. In the world of today, such a quality was truly rare and invaluable. With the battle over and done with, Fu Tian started to treat his wounds. He had gritted his teeth and participated in the battle just then, as he hadn't wanted to be a burden on everyone else. He had an extremely competitive and proud personality. "Master, Should we pursue that legless old man? The Azura Demon Emperor asked. Ling Han pondered for a moment before shaking his head, and said, "Forget about it. He's the ruler of this island, and he's been here for tens of thousands of years as well. He definitely won't let us find him. But if we don't dispose of him, he'll continue to commit abhorrent crimes," Shui Yenyu said. "Then let's have a look around here to see if the old thief has left any clues," Ling Han replied. "In fact, we know nothing about that old thief. If we understand his history and personality, it will be much easier to find him." "Master is so wise," the Azura Demon Emperor said obsequiously. Ling Han glanced over, and tossed a puppet bear toward him. "Enter this puppet instead." The Azura Demon Emperor was slightly confused. Wasn't his current puppet stronger? It was at the pseudo-sun moon tier, and its battle prowess was several times stronger than that of the puppet bear. However, he suddenly came to a realization after seeing the look of disgust in Ling Han's eyes. As a human, his master naturally detested refining human corpses into puppets. He didn't dare disobey Ling Han, and he immediately entered the body of the puppet bear. These puppets didn't possess any free will or life force, so entering and exiting them couldn't be any easier. Ling Han incinerated both human puppets. He had only kept them to battle Pei Ji, so now that their battle was over, it was also right for him to give the deceased a proper send-off. They started to look for clues in the small workshop. Ling Han hadn't held high hopes, yet they managed to find a diary that was kept by Pei Ji. This diary detailed the process and reason for Pei Ji's abominable hobby. So it turns out that the male and female puppets were his senior brother and senior sister. The three of them were all disciples of the same puppeteer. He secretly loved his senior sister, yet she married his senior brother. He didn't let his emotions show, yet after their master died, he poisoned the two of them before restraining and then refining them into puppets. No wonder the male puppet was stabbed full of sabers and sword. It was because Pei Ji hated him tremendously. What an absolute freak. He even refined the woman that he loved into a puppet. The diary also had a detailed description of how he had refined his senior brother and senior sister. Their insults, reprimands, fury, terror, and all kinds of other things were all carefully recorded. It was as if Pei Ji wanted to relive that experience through reading his diary. What kind of hopelessness would one experience when they're betrayed by their junior brother and refined into a puppet alive? Shui Yenyu's eyes were burning with anger as she shook her head. So, one can't simply focus on talent when taking in disciples. The most important factor is still their character. Otherwise, it's no different from raising a wolf. Ling Han also sighed with emotion, yet his words sent ripples of panic through the Azura Demon Emperor's mind. Was his master giving him a veiled warning? Wang. Right at this moment, a sword light lit up and pierced toward Ling Han's back. This strike was both quick and vicious, and it was more so completely unexpected. The battle had already ended, and there were only people they had fought alongside in this room. Who would suddenly attack Ling Han? Pu. The sword pierced deep into Ling Han's body. Ling Han roared loudly and struck behind him. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor also came to his senses, and hurriedly let out a growl before swinging his bare paws toward the assailant. The assailant didn't have time to retrieve their sword, so they could only release it and leap back. They instantly retreated 16 or so meters before descending like a cloud and landing lightly on their feet. The assailant was none other than Yin Yuanxiang. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu shouted in shock, and immediately held Ling Han in support as tears rolled down her cheeks. The sword had run through Ling Han's body, and only the hilt was still visible on the outside. Jin Zhuohui was both shocked and enraged as he glared at Yin Yuanxiang, and he roared, What are you doing?" Only Fu Tian remained sitting on the ground, yet it was clear that his muscles were already tight with tension. Ling Han simply stared at Yin Yuanxiang. In a raspy voice, he said, "So the culprit on the ship was actually you. How so?" The careful expression that Yin Yuanxiang had worn this entire time suddenly changed into an expression of pride and arrogance. Not only that, but her aura also changed dramatically, instantly shooting up to the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Ling Han coughed a few times as his face grew even paler, and said, Just before Zhu Gaoyang died, he said that the culprit wasn't him. Yin Yuanxiang had successfully stabbed Ling Han, so she was in no hurry at all. In order to stay alive, it's only natural that he would attempt to shift the blame elsewhere. Ling Han shook his head and said, if the culprit were him, he would have most likely only begged for forgiveness rather than try to shift the blame. Yin Yuanxiang was slightly surprised and said, so, you started to suspect me? Indeed. Ling Han nodded and said, I was thinking that since the Dark Knight Hall could send an assassin, why couldn't they send two? One in the open, and one in hiding. Yin Yuanxiang hesitated for a moment before bursting into loud laughter. Spot on. There's no need for me to deceive you any longer. I'm indeed an assassin from the Dark Knight Hall. However, don't even think about buying time. That sword is covered in potent poison, and even elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would die if they were pierced by it. Shui Yenyu was finally overcome with shock. She was extremely confident in Ling Han's regeneration ability, yet poison was a completely different story. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I have to thank you for admitting to this. I was only suspicious before, but I'm finally certain now. He stood up and raised his left arm slightly, and the sword that was stabbed into him instantly fell onto the ground with a clang. It turned out that the sword hadn't pierced his body at all. Rather, it had merely been held between his arm and chest. What? The expression on Yin Yuanxiang's pretty face changed drastically, and she said incredulously, I clearly stabbed the sword through your heart. The location was definitely right. Unless, she stared at Ling Han, and continued, unless you were prepared this entire time and had already shifted the locations of your bones. A smile blossomed across Ling Han's face, and he said, since I was suspicious about there being another assassin from the Dark Knight Hall among us, how could I not have my guard up? But why did you suspect me? Yin Yuanxiang couldn't fathom the reason, and she said, I clearly used a secret technique to suppress my cultivation level. Even elites at the lower end of the Sun-Moon tier shouldn't have been able to see through my disguise, much less you. Ling Han nodded and replied, your disguise was indeed good. However, when we were surrounded by the puppets, you still ended up using power that far exceeded what you should have been capable of. That raised suspicion in my mind, and also caused me to become more wary of you. Yin Yuanxiang was slightly dazed upon hearing this answer. The situation had been so chaotic at that time, yet Ling Han still had the leisure to keep an eye on the entire battleground. What kind of freak was he? This couldn't be helped. Who told Ling Han's divine sense to be far superior compared to that of ordinary cultivators at the medium extreme? Since the simple method didn't work, I'll have to resort to the more difficult method. Yin Yuanxiang chuckled coldly, and drew another sword as a frosty and sinister aura emanated from her body. She was an elite at the consummate level. Chapter 1031, Killing Yin Yuanxiang. Chapter 1031, Killing Yin Yuanxiang. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu's fear instantly turned into delight, and she couldn't help but tightly embrace Ling Han from behind. She had truly been scared to death just then. Jin Zhehui also breathed a sigh of relief, yet his eyes were burning with extreme fury as he glowered at Yin Yuanxiang. Generally speaking, betrayal was what people detested the most. They had gone through thick and thin together battling the demonic snakes, defending against the pirate attack, and exterminating the puppets on this island. It could be said that they had formed strong bonds of camaraderie. Yet, Yin Yuanxiang suddenly betrayed them at this moment, and it felt as if a sword had been plunged into all of their backs. Master, let me tear this B***tch to shreds, the Azura Demon Emperor offered. Ling Han nodded, and said, fine. The Azura Demon Emperor growled and immediately lunged toward Yin Yuanxiang. He had been held captive for too long, and he had a strong desire to stretch and relax his body through battle. Anyhow, he was merely controlling the body of a puppet, so it didn't matter even if the puppet was destroyed. Ling Han had a ton of spares, and he could simply enter another puppet. He was only afraid of divine sense attacks. You're merely a piece of trash. Yin Yuanxiang raised her sword and charged to attack. She was indeed really powerful, with a cultivation level at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Although she couldn't fight above her cultivation level, her battle prowess was still the strongest among everyone present. As the saying went, a tigerless mountain would be ruled by monkeys. This was exactly the case right now. If young Tai Cheng were still alive, her only option would be to lie low and continue using her disguise. Peng, 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 zi. The Azura Demon Emperor continuously retreated, and in the end, slid over to Ling Han's feet. His momentum was only halted when Ling Han raised his foot and stepped on his body. "Are you strong enough to defeat her or what?" Ling Han said with a chuckle. There was a bitter expression on the Azura Demon Emperor's face, and he said, "Master, she's a bit too strong." The puppet bear was only at the late stage of the consummate level, and it was an entire sub-minor level weaker than Yin Yuanxiang. As such, he had been on the back foot the entire time. Ha 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 ha. Yin Yuanxiang laughed loudly, and said, "Who told you to pretend to be so compassionate and kind? You clearly had 2 pseudo-sun moon tear puppets, yet you destroyed them with your own hands. Pei. You had already used it once, so what's wrong with using it twice or thrice? Engage her. I'll cover you from behind." Ling Han kicked the Azura Demon Emperor, and the puppet bear instantly flew through the sky toward Yin Yuanxiang. 100 Ghosts Sword Technique. Yin Yuanxiang let out a soft cry, and numerous ghosts materialized in the air and swooped toward the Azura Demon Emperor as she brandished her sword. Ling Han also moved. He was currently preparing the Crimson Ground locking net, and as long as he trapped Yin Yuanxiang within it, her battle prowess would immediately fall to the high extreme. At that time, it would be extremely easy to capture her. In your dreams. Yin Yuanxiang's body danced around in a peculiar manner, making Ling Han unable to lock onto her. Once someone was prepared, it was extremely difficult to utilize treasures such as the Crimson Ground locking net. Is that so? Ling Han smiled faintly, and suddenly activated his 7-kill subduing soul technique. Divine sense attacks were formless and intangible, and their speed was also quick beyond belief. Generally speaking, they were impossible to dodge. One could only face such an attack head-on and duel to see whose divine sense was stronger and more resilient. Yin Yuanxiang was instantly hit by the attack, causing her movements to falter and her sword to stop. However, she was someone at the peak stage of the consummate level, after all, so she was only dazed for a mere fraction of a second. There was absolutely no time for Ling Han to absorb her into the Black Tower. In fact, there wasn't even enough time for him to release the Crimson Ground locking net. However, the Azura Demon Emperor suddenly lunged over at this moment. He didn't swing his paws, instead choosing to give Yin Yuanxiang a tight bear hug. He was only 1 sub-minor level weaker than Yin Yuanxiang, so her suddenly stopping for an instant was enough time for him to take advantage of it. "Master, I've caught her," the Azura Demon Emperor shouted excitedly. She was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Even when he had been at his strongest, he could still only kneel if he were to come across such a powerful being. He had never imagined that he would be able to hold his own against such an opponent. Yin Yuanxiang's expression suddenly changed, and she shouted, "Let go." The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't hurt her, but Ling Han was already activating the Crimson Ground locking net. She was stronger than the Azura Demon Emperor, and the puppet bear's arm was twisted at an unnatural angle as she tried to break free with all her might. It was clear that the puppet bear's bones had been snapped out of shape. If it were a normal being, they would definitely howl in pain. Moreover, how much strength could one exert if they were to suffer such unbearable pain? However, the Azura Demon Emperor didn't feel *T. He simply maintained his tight bear hug on Yin Yuanxiang and tried to buy as much time for Ling Han as possible. Hua! The Crimson Ground locking net unfurled and fell down from above them. Yin Yuanxiang and the Azura Demon Emperor's cultivation level instantly fell by 1 minor level. Yin Yuanxiang unleashed her might, and bursts of sword chi shot out from her body and slashed at the Azura Demon Emperor. Her strength was still considerably above the Azura Demon Emperor's, so she was naturally at an advantage when battling against him. The body of the puppet bear became so mangled that it was barely recognizable. This was already thanks to the fact that the puppet bear had been tempered by secret techniques, causing its bones to become extremely sturdy. Otherwise, it would have already been torn to shreds by Yin Yuanxiang's ferocious and relentless attacks. Ling Han drew his bow and activated the ultimate arrow. When the arrow pointed at Yin Yuanxiang, she instantly felt a cold chill envelop her. She had a feeling that she would definitely die if Ling Han released this arrow. At this moment, she didn't have any time to ponder what kind of arrow technique this was, nor did she have time to mull over why it was so mighty and powerful. There was only a single thought running through her mind, and that was to break free from this net and avoid being shot by the arrow. Otherwise, death was the only thing that awaited her. "Let go of me. Let go of me." Yin Yuanxiang's pretty face distorted in distress, and there wasn't a single shred of charisma about her anymore. She drew on all her strength and origin power, and even started to draw on her source power as she started to flee while carrying the Azura Demon Emperor and Crimson ground-locking net. Surprisingly, her speed was actually quite quick. However, regardless of how fast she was, how could she compete against the annihilating Dragon Star arrow? Xiu! The sharp arrow pierced through the air and whizzed toward Yin Yuanxiang. Pu! The arrow sped through the net and pierced into Yin Yuanxiang's chest, sending a plume of blood spurting through the air. The arrow continued to penetrate through her body, eventually exiting through her back and piercing into the puppet bear's body. Peng! The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't help but let go under the tremendous power of the blow, causing the human and bear to finally separate. "Brat, I'm going to kill." Peng! Yin Yuanxiang was just about to shout a threat, yet her entire chest suddenly exploded. Her face was filled with shock, and as she lowered her head to look at her non-existent heart, a single thought ran through her mind. "Isn't this the Dark Knight Hall's explosive assassin arrow? How laughable. As an assassin of the Dark Knight Hall, I actually died at the hands of a weapon forged by my own organization. Is this retribution?" Just as she finished thinking this, her entire body fell forward, dead. The Azura Demon Emperor transformed into his misty form, and said, "Master, another puppet has been destroyed." First, the puppet tiger had been destroyed, and now the puppet bear had also been destroyed. A day had yet to pass, yet he had already destroyed 2 extremely valuable host bodies. Ling Han casually tossed a puppet wolf toward him, and said, "No worries. Just change into another puppet." After that, he put the Crimson ground-locking net away. It was an extremely useful treasure, especially before he reached the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. I genuinely need to thank the Luo clan. If Luo Hongdao learned of his thoughts, he would definitely seethe with rage. How could it not be useful? Did Ling Han know how many resources the Luo clan had poured into forging this net? Search this place thoroughly, and don't leave any stone unturned. Make sure to take everything away. Chapter 1032, Treasure That Heavenly Body Tier Cultivators Fight For? Chapter 1032, Treasure That Heavenly Body Tier Cultivators Fight For? Ling Han needed to prepare for 2 scenarios. What if they couldn't find Peiji anymore? This was an island, and there were only limited resources available. Only the demonic chi seemed to be limitless, appearing once every year. However, the other resources would definitely dwindle as they were used. There was simply no way that one could use the resources as they pleased. Take, for example, the godly metal that was used to strengthen puppets. Peiji had taken these from his master, and there was only a small amount remaining right now. If they took it away, Peiji would be missing a vital ingredient for puppet making. No matter how talented he was, how could he make a puppet without the necessary materials? Even if he carried some materials on him, he would only be able to make a limited amount of puppets. He would be dreaming if he wanted to recreate the large army of puppets that he'd once owned. Some of the materials were extremely valuable, which made Ling Han extremely satisfied. This was because puppet making had some relation to forging, alchemy, formations, and so on and so forth. Thus, the materials that were used for puppet making could also be used for other purposes. Ling Han sorted the materials and found that many could be sold once he returned to the capital. He was certainly going to rake in a huge amount of true origin stones. Jin Zhuhui and Fu Tian both received some materials as well, though the largest portion was obviously taken by Ling Han. The two of them had no issues with this, as Ling Han had indeed done the most. They were basically just passengers and onlookers. Strictly speaking, they even owed their lives to Ling Han. Without him, it was very likely that they would be lying in 8 pieces in some workshop right now, forced to watch as their bodies were refined into puppets. They found a few ships, though they all were quite small. In fact, they were only a little bigger than boats. However, these ships were made from the unique demonic beasts of this sea, and they were even fitted with some strange device that allowed the ships to cut through the sea at high speed. There were 5 such ships, so each of them was able to take one. The extra ship was stowed away by Ling Han. It didn't matter whether he needed it in the future or not. The space in the Black Tower was very large anyway, so he wasn't afraid of it taking up too much room. Farewell, Brother Ling. Till later. Jin Zhehui and Fu Tian both bade Ling Han farewell. They didn't plan to return to the Tyrant Axe Harbor, either. Instead, they ventured into the sea, each going their own way. Ling Han watched them disappear into the distance. Then, he turned around and smiled at Shui Yenyu, saying, "Wife, it's only you and me left on this island. Should we make a bunch of kids before returning?" Shui Yenyu punched his chest in annoyance, and said, "Do you think I'm a sow? Also, are we really the only 2 people on this island?" She shot a glance at the Azura Demon Emperor. The Azura Demon Emperor was given a fright, scared that Master's wife would suddenly slay him due to embarrassment. He immediately raised a leg and started to scratch his ear as any normal wolf would. It was as if his expression were saying that he wasn't a person, merely a dog. Shui Yenyu couldn't help but giggle upon seeing his expression. She had already learned of his background, yet she was still unable to fathom how an elite at the Mountain River tier could be so extremely shameless. Ling Han chortled loudly, and sent the Azura Demon Emperor back into the Black Tower. He then pulled her over and started groping her slender and shapely body. "Damn pervert! Stop it!" Shui Yenyu murmured. Her starry eyes were extremely seductive, and her hands rested on Ling Han's chest, trying to push him away, yet also unwilling to do so. "Stop what?" Ling Han kissed her jade-like neck and lightly nibbled her earlobe, causing her slender body to suddenly tighten up and her face to suddenly flush with an alluring shade of red. "This damn pervert has figured out all my weak points." Shui Yenyu was breathing heavily as she buried her head into Ling Han's chest, and she said, "Peiji might still be on the island." Ling Han nodded in agreement. This was indeed a possibility, as this island was very large, after all. They had also been few in numbers, so they had been unable to thoroughly search the entire island. Perhaps Peiji was waiting for Ling Han and the others to leave before he returned to his workshop. Ling Han continued to grope Shui Yenyu's body as he pondered this possibility. He had already developed a habit of doing this. Shui Yenyu was slightly annoyed by this. What kind of habit is this? Why does he have to grope my chest when pondering questions? In these past few days, this damn pervert has already groped my chest for longer than I have in my entire life. We don't have time to deal with that old thief. Let's burn those courtyards down and be done with it. Ling Han finally reached a decision, and said, "Let's continue to look for pirates. Now that we have our own ship, we can come and go as we please." Millimeter. Shui Yenyu nodded in agreement. They had killed quite a lot of pirates before, yet it had only been enough to complete a single mission. Since they had already come here, and since the mission could be completed numerous times, they might as well kill a few more pirates. They immediately sprung into action, burning the entire village and then setting off from the beach. "I wonder where that colossal pit leads to," Ling Han said. "Moreover, it even spits out a wisp of demonic chi every once in a while. We definitely have to check it out in the future and see what lies at the bottom of the pit." Shui Yenyu was also extremely curious, and said, "We can't fly before reaching the heavenly body tier, so we can only come back after we break through. I wonder if elites at the heavenly body tier can fly over this expanse of sea," Ling Han mused. Shui Yenyu wasn't sure, either, as the Shui clan didn't have any elites at the heavenly body tier. As for the heavenly body tier cultivators of other clans, who had the courage to ask them? The ship was genuinely small, and it was completely unsuited for sailing over the sea, with a single wave being capable of capsizing the ship. However, this was no ordinary ship, but a ship that had been made by puppeteers. As such, there were all kinds of small trinkets on the ship that allowed it to remain extremely stable while still being extremely quick. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were in no hurry, either, as they enjoyed some lovey-dovey time with each other. They were only 15 or so centimeters away from becoming a true pair of husband and wife. Hu Yang, how long are you going to flee? A loud roar suddenly traveled over. He, Ju Yuyun, do you think I'm afraid of you? Another voice replied. Then why are you running away? The first voice asked. Then let's battle. This lord is also pissed off by the insect following behind me. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu exchanged a surprised glance. They raised their heads, only to see two people standing proudly as they faced off in the sky. The ability to fly. They were great elites at the heavenly body tier. No. It was more correct to say that they were at least at the heavenly body tier. Ling Han turned to Shui Yenyu and asked, have you ever heard of these two people before? Shui Yenyu pondered for a moment, and an astonished expression suddenly appeared on her face. Ju Yuyun. Could he be the heavenly body tier elite from the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire? He's a lone cultivator, and although he's reached the heavenly body tier, he's never formed a force of his own. As for Hu Yang, I think he's a great elite from the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. Why is he facing off against Ju Yuyun in this kind of place? Sure enough, these two people were both elites at the heavenly body tier. Otherwise, huge changes would ensue if a great elite at the Eternal River tier or Genesis tier were to appear on the joint peace planet. Judging by their previous exchange, it seems like they've already skirmished for quite a while, Ling Han said. At their cultivation, there are only two possibilities that could have led to this. The first is a grudge between them, and the second is because of a treasure. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu could see the astonishment in each other's eyes as they exchanged a glance. A treasure that could trigger a fight between two elites at the heavenly body tier was definitely incredibly valuable. Chapter 1033, Caught Up. Chapter 1033, Caught Up. Humph. The regulations of heaven and earth are extremely chaotic here, so it's genuinely an optimal place to battle. Ju Yuyun chuckled and said, Hu Yang, if you don't want to die here, then hurry and hand the item over. Hu Yang roared with laughter and said, Ju Yuyun, are you trying to scare this lord? You and I are both at the peak stage of the low extreme, and our battle prowess is similarly at 2 stars. If we battle with our lives on the line, it's hard to say who will be killing whom. I only know that if you don't hand the item over, this will be the resting place for your corpse. Ju Yuyun threatened in a sinister voice. Is this really necessary? Hu Yang asked. That item can't be opened anyway. Are you really willing to bet your life and tens of millions of years of cultivation on some unknown item? Ju Yuyun flared up in rage and said, you and I discovered that item together, and we even agreed to examine it together. However, you took advantage of the moment when I wasn't paying attention, and actually fled with the item. How can I swallow this anger if I don't kill you? Hu Yang chuckled and said, I didn't think that you would actually be so naive. No wonder you've spent all of your time on cultivation and been lonely this entire time. You're stupid beyond belief. Die. Ju Yuyun roared in anger and lashed out at Hu Yang. Boom. Devastating flashes of light instantly exploded throughout the sky as bursts of overwhelming shock waves surged out from the battle. Like a giant mountain, a roaring wave that measured hundreds of meters tall crashed through the sea. Fuck. We're going to be caught up in the shock waves from their battle. Ling Han grimaced. Their luck was truly terrible. There were so many places that the two heavenly body tier elites could have battled, yet they somehow managed to choose the sky directly above them. Weren't they two innocent bystanders going to suffer for nothing? However, now that it had come to this, their only option was to endure. Ling Han held his sword in his hand as he stood at the bow of the ship and awaited the giant wave that was surging toward them. When the wave arrived, he gave a loud roar and ferociously slashed down, forcefully carving out a narrow gap in the wave and allowing their ship to pass. Shua, shua, shua. He continued to slash his sword down. This wave was far too large, and each slash that he performed could only open a gap that ran 30 meters deep. He needed to continuously slash at the wave to ensure that it didn't close in on them. The ship finally sailed through the wave, and Ling Han was so tired that he could barely raise his arms. The seawater here was extremely peculiar, with each drop being as heavy as a mountain. So, how terrifying was a surging wave? Moreover, the wave had been triggered by 2 elites at the heavenly body tier, so it naturally contained a shred of the heavenly body tier's might. It was already a minor miracle that Ling Han had been able to navigate the ship through it, and it would have been beyond comprehension if he hadn't been completely beat and exhausted. Boom! 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 Before Ling Han could even recover his breath, several new waves suddenly formed and started to surge toward them. Taking a quick glance, there were at least several hundred gigantic waves. Holy fuck! Ling Han wanted to give up and send the ship into the Black Tower. Meanwhile, he and Shui Yenyu could take cover underwater. They could resurface when the 2 elites finished their battle, then take their ship out, and set off for their destination again. However, coming across a battle between 2 elites at the heavenly body tier was a rare opportunity, and watching them battle would definitely be especially beneficial to his own cultivation. Thus, Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to endure. He continued to unleash the 10,000 techniques return to 1 to slash the giant waves apart. Fortunately, his power had also increased considerably along with the elevation of his cultivation level. Thus, although the might of the 10,000 techniques return to 1 was significantly reduced, its toll on him had also become much lower than before, allowing him to keep enduring. Of course, the most important factor was still his sturdy physique and astonishing stamina. Otherwise, if he'd been an ordinary cultivator at the mountain river tier, his arms would have already become numb and limp. Ling Han persevered, and under the strong intensity of the waves, his willpower was also steeled. A burning fighting spirit raged within him, and he felt as if he could even battle against an elite at the heavenly body tier. Meanwhile, the battle in the sky became more and more intense as both elites began to unleash their true powers. Dark clouds swarmed about, blotting out the sun. Then, in the next instant, flames seared through the air and transformed it into a sea of fire, appearing as if it were about to incinerate the sky and evaporate the sea. Elites at the heavenly body tier were far too powerful. Ling Han felt as if he were a mere ant. No, he felt even worse than a mere ant. If either of the 2 people wanted to kill him, they would be able to do so with a single glance, not even needing to lift a single finger. Power. This is true power. There was a strong hunger in Ling Han's mind as excitement surged through his body. He was unable to see the battle in the sky clearly, as the 2 elites soared about and unleashed their complete strength. The sky was burning, and the sea was boiling. This place had become like hell on earth. Fortunately, the 2 elites wandered further and further away from Ling Han and Shui Yenyu's position. Otherwise, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have been able to block the devastating shock waves that were being generated by their intense battle. Boom! An extremely thick column of light suddenly shot out from the sea and soared into the sky. Such was its astounding might that it could even be seen from hundreds of kilometers away. Hu Yang chuckled, and said, "Ju Yuyun, a historical site was opened by us. Why don't you head over and explore it? This lord won't compete with you. Bullsh *T. That site is only at the sun-moon tier. How can it compete with the value of that box?" Ju Yuyun roared angrily. "It's completely worthless. It can't be opened anyway. Then why are you keeping it? Give it to me. This lord likes this kind of strange and peculiar things. Fuck off." The 2 of them started to battle again, the intensity of their battle even greater than before. Blood sprayed from their bodies and instantly dyed the sky red, even transforming into a boundless blood rain that was brimming with terrifying killing intent. Numerous creatures in the sea became unfortunate victims, dying violently as their bodies came into contact with the blood rain. This was heavenly body tier blood, and being struck by a drop of such blood was like being struck by a heavenly body one. It was extremely terrifying. Ling Han had naturally placed Shui Yenyu and the ship into the Black Tower already, and he had also entered it himself. The surging waves carried them along, and they were submerged into the sea at times and were tossed into the air at others. The Black Tower was like a mustard seed, and even the extreme weight of the gravity fields was unable to affect it. In fact, it was resistant to all powers, and thus the regulations in this sea were completely ineffective against it. Shio! A small dot of light suddenly fell down from the sky. Ling Han had a sharp eye, and he instantly determined that it was a white jade box. It plopped into the sea and then started to sink rapidly. Is that what the two heavenly body tier elites were fighting over? Ling Han's heart thumped with excitement. He couldn't snatch something from a heavenly body tier elite, but this treasure had been knocked out of their hands now, giving him a chance to obtain it. Though, it had landed quite far away. Before Ling Han could even exit the Black Tower, Ju Yuyun and Hu Yang had already shot down from the sky and plunged into the sea. They continued to skirmish as they chased after the white jade box, and both of them wanted to break free and move in front of the other. However, the gravity was immense here, and the jade box sunk at a tremendous speed. Ling Han lost sight of it in no time at all, and the two powerful elites also disappeared from his sight in a flash. Meanwhile, the Black Tower continued to drift along the sea, unseen and undetected by others. Ling Han's mind whirred, and he finally made a decision. He resolutely leaped out of the Black Tower. An overwhelming weight instantly bore down on him, dragging him deeper and deeper into the sea. This was exactly what he wanted. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,